Chapter 321. When Xia Yunting entered the water, Wei Wei Bai immediately hid in a far corner, unwilling to come over. His expression was unclear as he leaned against the side of the bath, his eyes burning as he looked at her. The two of them, one staring, the other dodging. It was like a confrontation between a beast and its prey. Just when Wei Wei Bai thought he couldn't hold back and was about to pounce, he suddenly leaned against the side of the bath, his eyelids drooping, hiding the aggression in his eyes. When did you and Qinjingji start dating? Wei Wei Bai didn't understand why he would ask this, but she still answered. We knew each other when we were young. He is the son of the Prime Minister. I remember the first time I saw him was when I was 6. He was so young, but he had a straight face. I thought this person was really cute. Xia Yunting. He was even cuter when he was 6. He was so cute that all the servants and elders praised him. In the end, that vicious mistress began to frame him because he was too cute. He was cute enough to make people jealous and frame him. How could Qinjingji compare to him? When Wei Wei Bai thought of Qinjingji, her expression softened and her voice became sweet. Although Jingji looked serious, he was very protective of me. At that time, I was playful and couldn't get down from the tree. He even deliberately reached out to carry me down, but he was too small and couldn't hold me. We rolled down the tree. Speaking to this point, she couldn't help but laugh. Xia Yunting was hit in the heart by her lovely smile. He fiercely glared at her. Chun Jingji, that waste, grew up to be a waste, and as a child he was also a waste. If it were him, he wouldn't let her fall down the tree. Even if she fell, he would use himself as a cushion to catch her. Wei Wei Bai finally relaxed when she talked about her beloved. When I grew up, Father wanted to find a teacher for me. He happened to be the top scorer, so I let him teach me. Xia Yunting was angry and sad. He was also the top scorer and the super top scorer of the Lu Yuan. Why didn't she choose him? Was it because Chun Jingji became the top scorer a few years earlier than him? Wei Wei Bai smiled sweetly. He taught me many things. We played together, recited poems together, admired the moon and flowers together, drank wine together, and experienced many, many things together. The system flipped through the pages again and again. Fuck, why couldn't it find a single thing that the host had mentioned? It had clearly done its homework. Chun Jingji and the little emperor didn't know each other at all. When Chun Jingji was a teacher because he was too strict, he was stabbed by the original owner. The original owner of the body couldn't wait to throw Chun Jingji into the well. So, how could he recite a poem? The host was bragging again. The system was expressionless. Wei Wei Bai was still bragging.
He's a little shy.
I was the one who confessed first. Xia Yunting felt like he was looking for abuse. What did he want to do by bringing up this topic? Besides making himself jealous, what else could he do? He saw the happy smile on her face. Finally, he couldn't hold back his anger and shouted, "That's enough." The smile on Wei Wei Bai's face disappeared, and she shut her mouth. Xia Yunting pushed aside the petals in the water, rushed to her in a few steps, and held her in his arms. He pinched her chin, his eyes full of cold malice. Emperor, you're wrong. You still have one thing that Qin Jingji hasn't let you experience. Wei Wei Bai frowned in confusion. Xia Yunting had already reached out and pressed her against the edge of the bath. He leaned over and said to her, he hasn't let you become a real woman. Not waiting for Wei Wei Bai to resist, he rubbed her bright face with his fingers, his expression evil. Since he's a soft egg and can't let you experience the joy of being a woman, let this minister help you. / To facilitate the next reading, you can click the button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 322. Xia Yunting looked him up and down for a while, the jealousy in his eyes more obvious. He didn't have an extra leg or 2 eyes. Why did the little emperor keep thinking about him? He grabbed the knife in his hand and couldn't help but sneer. What's the matter, Chundaran? You really are forgetful. Inciting Zhao Wang to rebel, working with the royalists to get you out of prison, and finally abducting the emperor. Which one of these isn't important? Chun Jingji lowered his eyes and calmly said, Tai Fu is wrongly accusing this official. This official is in prison. How could he have this ability? Xia Yunting didn't waste time. He took a stack of letters from the table and threw them into the cell. This is evidence of Zhao Wang's correspondence with you and the testimony of several of his confidants. Chun Jingji didn't pay attention to the letters. He looked at Xia Yunting, his eyes unusually calm. So? Are you going to kill me, Tai Fu? Xia Yunting threw the knife in his hand into the cell, where it fell at Chun Jingji's feet. I don't just want to kill you, I want to tear you to pieces. But your dog life is still useful, so I'll let you live. Chun Jingji was expressionless, without a trace of emotion. Xia Yunting laughed mockingly. But you can escape death, but you can't avoid punishment. Castrate yourself. Chun Jingji couldn't help but twitch his mouth. Castrate myself? Xia Yunting frowned in disgust. I originally wanted to scratch your face, but seeing your repulsive appearance, there was no value in doing so, so I settled for the next best thing, and cut off your dirty thing. Chun Jingji, dirty thing? Only I have dirty things, you don't? Xia Yunting looked at him coldly. Do you want to do it yourself, or should I have people tie you up like a pig and castrate you in front of everyone? Chun Jingji suddenly sighed. Tai Fu, do you know what you look like now? Xia Yunting looked at him coldly, not responding. Chun Jingji was not affected. He exclaimed, You look like those jealous concubines who want to frame the legal wife. It's unbearably ugly. Xia Yunting's weakness was ruthlessly stepped on by his words. Chun Jingji was insulting him. But how could Xia Yunting not know that he was a jealous man? He was jealous that Chun Jingji was able to obtain her love, while he was like a dark and vicious demon, desperately trying to break them apart. He stood up, kicked open the cell door, and grabbed Chun Jingji's collar. He lifted him up and gave him a few punches. Chun Jingji was not strong enough to resist. Xia Yunting's eyes were red with jealousy. He kicked Chun Jingji away, but it wasn't enough to vent his anger, so he kicked him several more times. Chun Jingji curled up on the ground. His face was pale as he spat out a mouthful of blood. He stubbornly remained silent and did not beg for mercy. Instead, he chuckled. Xia Yunting, you should look at your own face. Where is that high-spirited man? Xia Yunting fiercely said, Shut up. Chun Jingji said with a mocking smile, You are simply a madman. Even if you kill me, do you think the emperor will like you? Xia Yunting punched him in the stomach. He gloomily looked at Chun Jingji. I told you to shut up. It seems you don't want your own tongue? Chun Jingji's eyes were full of confidence. His mouth was full of blood. You don't dare kill me? Xia Yunting's movements stiffened. He thought of the little emperor. Yes, he killed Chun Jingji. What else could trap her? Chun Jingji coldly sneered. Don't insist on things that don't belong to you. Xia Yunting, you forced the emperor to abdicate his throne and rebel. Are you stupid? // Chapter 323. Xia Yunting only felt his heart being surrounded by a huge sense of powerlessness. He tried to maintain a tough exterior. Do you think you can have her? Chun Jingji was silent for a moment, his eyes flashing with some complex emotions, some struggle and some sweetness. Finally, he accepted his fate and said, We like each other. Isn't that enough? She wanted Xia Yunting to misunderstand that they were together. He could only accept his fate and play along with her. If the monarch wants the minister to die, the minister has no choice but to die. In fact, he was not so foolishly loyal. His previous blind loyalty was because he had a purpose, so he pretended to be so. But now, hey, she didn't want it, but he had to rush forward with his blind loyalty. Xia Yunting saw him like this, and the happiness in his eyes was not fake. His love was not fake. They were really together. Xia Yunting's fingers trembled. He picked up a knife and directly stabbed it into his abdomen. Chun Jingji shuddered in pain. His smile was a bit twisted. You can't have her even if you kill me. Xia Yunting then realized what he had done. He laughed bitterly. You're wrong. I can have her. A person without a heart is also good. Who do you think you are? Do you have the ability to fight with me? Chun Jingji's face was drained of blood, but he was still calm. You're wrong. It's because I didn't fight that you had the opportunity to reach this point. I'm not worse than you, Xia Yunting. Xia Yunting stood up. He looked at him gloomily. What's the point of saying such big words? In any case, you lost. The one in the cell is you, not me. Chun Jingji's face was dark and unclear. He coldly said, the emperor is a woman. Xia Yunting did not look back. So what? Chun Jingji covered his abdomen, his hands covered in blood. He said without trembling, someone will find out sooner or later. What are you going to do? Xia Yunting's murderous or a sword? I'll kill them one by one.
What's so hard about that?
Chun Jingji laughed twice, extremely weak. I didn't expect you to be so naive. You forced the abdication to this point. If you don't sit on the throne, you can only wait for internal strife. Those who supported Xia Yunting, which one didn't wait for merit. Only when Xia Yunting became the emperor could those who followed him become the new emperor. If Xia Yunting didn't take the lead, how could the people around him agree? At that time, the one who attacked Wei Wei Bai was Xia Yunting's trusted aide, a loyal hero. Wei Wei Bai had already become a thorn in the side of Xia Yunting's subordinates. Xia Yunting walked out of the cell, glancing back at him. This is my business, you don't need to worry about it. Finished speaking, Xia Yunting went out to instruct a nearby eunuch to call for an imperial physician to treat Chun Jingji. The knife was too short to stab him to death, but the wound was torturous enough. When he returned to the palace, Wei Wei Bai was still asleep. Her eyebrows were tightly knitted together. Her lips were pink and tender, but they had lost their vitality. Xia Yunting was lying on the edge of the bed, looking at her greedily. He reached out to soothe the worry between her brows. Then, he climbed onto the bed and carefully held her in his arms. Their posture was intimate, but there was also a hint of caution. Wei Wei Bai fell asleep without knowing anything. She was soft and warm in his arms, like a fire that didn't burn people. Xia Yunting looked at her in the middle of the night. He only felt his irritable mood gradually calm down. Outside, the dew was heavy. Inside, the room was peaceful. For the first time, Xia Yunting realized what it meant to be peaceful. He belatedly remembered what he had done to her. She had found happiness under him. Chapter 324. Her reaction was incomparably inexperienced, but beautiful enough to make a person lose their mind. He thought of the marks he left on her snow-white skin. He thought of when she was in love, the color of her body, like a rose in full bloom. He finally came to his senses. That guy Chun Jingji simply couldn't compare to him. Now that she was in his arms, her happiness was his, her sorrow was also his. He had a lot of time to slowly wear down her heart. And Chun Jingji had no power or money and was locked up by him. He didn't let them meet, the distance was too far, the time was too long. He didn't believe that any feelings couldn't be erased. And Chun Jingji was wrong. She could only suffer with this waste of a man. When they were together, even if the little emperor wanted to be beautiful, she could only pick the wild flowers in the mountains to decorate. Of course, she was beautiful no matter what she wore. But this also showed that Chun Jingji was poor. How could the poor dare to talk about love? Wearing the wild flowers in her beautiful hair was simply degrading the quality of her hair. The little emperor should be held in the palm of his hand. A flower should be carved from the best jade and gold. When wearing clothes, she had to wear the best silk and damask. Concubine? Humph! Have you ever heard of a concubine with such power and wealth? He was the main wife. Chun Jingji was the poor concubine. And he was a stray dog. He just went to beat a drowning dog, and it was simply dirty his hands. Xia Yunting tenderly stroked her long hair, his eyes burning with hope. I will give you better. No one can compare to me. Bai Weiwei slept oblivious. Perhaps because she was a little numb from sleeping in the same position, she automatically turned in her sleep, her face facing Xia Yunting's chest. Then she instinctively leaned against the warm place, placing her face on his chest and rubbing it. She seemed to feel comfortable and revealed a smile. When she did this, Xia Yunting's entire body was stiff as wood. He didn't dare move, afraid to wake her up. When he was sure that she didn't wake up, he finally couldn't help but reach out to touch her face. Xia Yunting touched the smile on her lips, and couldn't help but smile as well. The feeling of happiness came from her chest and from the sound of her breathing, even if there was only a little bit of happiness. But it was enough to make Xia Yunting happy for a long time. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 87. The system silently watched from the side, looking at the host sleeping like a dead pig, and then looking at Xia Yunting laughing like a silly dog. The host had already tortured the other party into a fool, yet the favorability of the other party still increased. So the male lead was indeed abused into a masochist? When Wei Bai woke up the next day, she saw Xia Yunting changing clothes. She leaned against the bed with a tired face, as if she was not interested in anything. Xia Yunting suddenly clapped his hands to have someone come in. A row of palace maids lowered their heads and brought in a pile of things. Palace maid 1 said, "Your Majesty, this is a white jade flower, hairpin inlaid with green jade. Only Your Majesty is worthy of wearing such a beautiful hairpin." Palace maid 2, "Your Majesty, this is a lotus-patterned golden hairpin. This hairpin is breathtakingly beautiful, but it can only match 1/10 of Your Majesty's beauty." Palace maid 3 said, "Your Majesty, this is an 18-layer golden silk robe. When you wear it, you will look like an immortal." Palace maid 4 said, "Your Majesty, this is—" Wei Bai immediately raised her hand. "Stop, you salesman, Jin won't buy it. Get out of here." Xia Yunting finished dressing and was still sorting out his accessories. He grabbed the jade pendant he was going to wear while secretly looking at Wei Bai. Early in the morning, he had people bring out the best things for her. The storehouses of the palace were all turned over, just to let the little emperor know the beauty of material things. The result was that the little emperor didn't seem happy. Wei Bai turned to look at Xia Yunting. "What do you want to do?" Xia Yunting, "Using gold and silver to corrode your willpower, abandoning the poor Chin dog." Transmigration system. Male god, come here. Transmigration system. Male god, come here. Transmigration system. Male god, come here and transmigration system. Male god, come here and read the at https://m/sashu. Com to facilitate your next reading, you can click the button at the bottom to record this reading. Transmigration system. Male god, come here, comma. Chapter 325. This sentence almost slipped out of her mouth. Xia Yunting calmed down, then turned to her and said, "Does the emperor not like it? This official had people choose the best for you. It's definitely better than a wild flower." Wei Bai looked at him, then suddenly smiled coldly. She pointed to those things and said, "These are all women's things. You brought them here to make me abdicate quickly and let you be the emperor?" When Xia Yunting heard this, he didn't even think to refute. "I didn't mean that." Wei Bai, "Then what do you mean?" "Right, the abdication edict has been written. You can go out now and announce it to the world, abolishing Jin, this incapable emperor who deceives the world." Xia Yunting didn't think that these things would stimulate her. He suddenly angrily shouted at the palace maids, "All of you get out, and burn those things." The palace maids hugged the things and quickly left. Wei Bai looked on coldly, not saying a word. Xia Yunting couldn't stand this kind of atmosphere. He tried to explain, "I just want you to see some jewelry that women should have." Wei Bai looked at him, her eyes empty. She suddenly smiled sadly. "Xia Yunting, I've never been a woman. I've only worn women's clothes a few times, and they were all for escaping." Xia Yunting's heart tightened. From birth, the little emperor was raised as a man. Wei Bai was sad. "I'm still on the throne. Giving me a pile of women's jewelry is useless, unless you want to abolish me." Xia Yunting couldn't bear to see her so haggard appearance. "The throne is yours, Bai Wei." Wei Bai shook her head. "I can't hide it forever. When the time comes, my body will mature. The difference between men and women is too big. No one is blind. The original owner relied on her young age, and the difference between men and women wasn't that big. She was a woman, so she couldn't be emperor. This dynasty was still a patriarchal society, and there had never been an empress. Once her identity was discovered, even Xie Yunting might not be able to withstand the backlash. She suddenly reached out and grabbed his hand. Xie Yunting, at that time, I'll probably be dead. Xie Yunting felt his heart twist, and his voice trembled. No, I won't let anything happen to you. Wei Bai, what can you do? You just want me to fake my death, let me return to my female appearance, and then keep me in the palace as your exclusive property for the rest of my life. Xie Yunting finally couldn't bear it anymore. The darkness in his eyes thickened, and he pulled her back, pushing her into a nearby chair. He lowered his head and trapped her between the chair and his arms. Listen well, even if you're an exclusive, you're still the noblest exclusive in this world. Even if you're not the emperor, you're still the empress. I won't let anyone surpass you. I'll give you the best, the most beautiful, and the most expensive things in the world. Wei Bai's eyes trembled. Xie Yunting's eyes were like fire, and his expression was frighteningly serious. So, whether you're the emperor or not, your status won't change. She would always be the first in his heart, no, the only one. Wei Bai finally reacted. She hesitated and said in disbelief, Xie Yunting, you wouldn't really fall in love with me, right? Xie Yunting hesitated, and his eyes flashed with a fierce struggle. Finally, he gave up. He lowered his head and placed a soft kiss on her lips. Then he whispered sincerely, Yes, I fell in love with you. Ding. The male lead's favorability has increased to 92. Transmigration system. Male god, come here. Transmigration system. Male god, come here. / transmigration system. Male god, come here. Transmigration system. Male god, come here. / transmigration system. Male god, come here. Chapter 326. Wei Bai's eyes drooped, her pale face cold without a trace of emotion. She suddenly smiled, her empty eyes suddenly lively, the spring breeze breaking the winter ice, beautiful and alive. But such a beautiful smile, her words were ruthless. Xie Yunting, you really disappoint me. Xie Yunting was sluggish for a moment, not knowing what he had done wrong. No matter how powerful a man was, in front of the person he was moved by, he couldn't wait to hold out his whole heart. Even his brain didn't have the slightest bit of intelligence. Wei Bai's fingers gently stroked his eyebrows. When I first saw you, you were so stunning. Riding a horse through the streets, high-spirited. Later, you became incomparably intelligent, your style unparalleled. Countless followers followed you. In this world, who doesn't admire Tai Fu? Xie Yunting didn't expect that in her eyes. He would have such a high valuation. But when she said these words, there was no trace of admiration in her eyes, not giving him the slightest chance to misunderstand. Wei Bai's smile didn't change, but her tone became more serious. But now what's the difference between you and those petty beauties of the boudoir? Xie Yunting, a maiden of the boudoir. Wei Bai withdrew her hand, raised her head, and looked at him coldly. Really a stray dog? You like this? What face do you have to love me? You don't carry out reforms, you don't ascend the throne, you're narrow-minded and short-sighted. Besides circling around me, what else have you done? 10,000 arrows piercing the heart was nothing more than this. His burning heart was kicked to the ground without any defense, and then crushed into powder by her disdain. Wei Bai's face was cold. The Tai Fu Darren I once worshipped has become like this. It's really disappointing. Now you don't have the qualifications to love me. Xie Yunting stiffened for a moment, then realized what she was saying. He thought he was mentally prepared to face the little emperor's hatred. But when he opened his most vulnerable place to her, being humiliated and mocked by her would still cause him so much pain that he wished he was dead. Xie Yunting retreated a few steps in a daze. He stared at her blankly, but he could only see coldness in her eyes. If I don't deserve to love you, does Qin Jingji deserve it? Wei Bai smiled sweetly. Between me and him, there's no need to talk about being compatible. It was intimate and gentle. She treated him the same as she treated Chen Jingji. One was the filth in the swamp, while the other was the treasure of the heavens. Xia Yunting laughed bitterly. Aren't you afraid that I'll kill Chen Jingji? Wei Wei Bai looked at him coldly. Then I will die with him. We are companions on the road to the underworld. We can meet again in the next life. Xia Yunting was finally provoked by her. He could no longer suppress his grief and madness. He reached out and grabbed her arm. He dragged her to the bed and pushed her onto it. Wei Wei Bai was dizzy from the fall. When she finally sobered up, she looked up. But she saw Xia Yunting's face full of ruthlessness. He walked over with the thin chain in his hand. Wei Wei Bai's face changed. Without thinking, she jumped out of bed to escape. But her movements were not as fast as Xia Yunting. He arrived in front of her and pushed her back onto the bed. Wei Wei Bai crawled into the bed in horror. Xia Yunting, what are you doing? Xia Yunting did not say a word. He reached out and grabbed her white and slender ankles. He dragged her out. She could not struggle. The chain was connected to the shackles. They coldly shackled her ankles. Crossing system. Male god, come here, crossing system. Male god, come here. / crossing system. Male god, come here. Crossing system. Male god, come here. Crossing system. Male god, come here. Chapter 327. Just right, it wouldn't make her feel uncomfortable. It had been measured and cast in advance, and the material was not afraid of swords or fire. Without the key, no one could unlock it. After making sure the little emperor was handcuffed, he locked the other end of the chain to the pillar. In this way, she was completely trapped here, unable to go anywhere. Wei Wei Bai looked at the chain on her foot in disbelief, her voice angry. What are you doing? Imprisoning me? Xia Yunting came in front of her, his face full of malice. Without a word, he lowered his head and kissed her. This kiss was fierce and confining, entangling her until she couldn't breathe, her whole body trembling. This kiss was long and torturous. By the time it was over, Wei Wei Bai's face was pale, her eyes shrinking. Xia Yunting also gasped for breath. He carefully stroked her eyebrows, her lips, her collarbone, her skin, her everything. Wei Wei Bai struggled, but couldn't. She began to soften and beg for mercy, but he didn't care. He just stroked her, but didn't take any further action. Wei Wei Bai began to doubt life. In the end, she was about to fall asleep. In the end, Xia Yunting suddenly stopped and hugged her. She belatedly realized that his whole body was trembling. His tears wet her shoulder. He was crying. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but reach out to pat him on the back, but hesitated, then took it back. Her heart was touched for a moment, but it was just a flash, and then disappeared. She was still calm and rational. And the coldly observing system also let out a sigh of relief and increased the effect of the emotional stripper. Xia Yunting didn't know how long he held her. When he finally had the strength, he got up again, then turned and walked out step by step. His voice was cold and calm, each word like a dripping blade. From today on, you will stay here. You can't go anywhere. You can think of ways to escape, but... He had already walked to the door and coldly turned his head. The sunlight outside shone in, clearly illuminating his grave and stern features. But you'll never run away from me. Even if this palace can't trap you, I can still use the heavily guarded palace as a cage. If the palace isn't big enough, then I'll use this world to trap you. Wei Wei Bai felt like she had awakened a lone wolf. No, it was a tyrant. Xia Yunting coldly sneered. Since you don't want my love, as long as I return to being that ambitious leader, then I'll overturn this world for you to see. Wei Wei Bai frowned. What are you doing? Xia Yunting said sarcastically. Do what I should have done from the start. Change this country's surname. After saying that, he ignored her and walked out. Then, Wei Wei Bai heard him vaguely instructing someone outside. It was nothing more than strengthening the security and forbidding anyone from entering or leaving the palace. Wei Wei Bai confirmed that Xia Yunting had really left. She laid down, powerlessly saying, I'm tired. Originally, it was a good palace romance drama, but because of that stupid side mission, it became a dog blood drama. My heart is tired, Tong, System. Tong, its heart was even more tired. Why are you forcing the male lead to be the emperor's? Wei Wei Bai thought deeply for a moment. I just feel that only the emperor is worthy of such a noble me. System. Be serious? Wei Wei Bai, how am I not serious? I'm the emperor. These days, who doesn't pay attention to marriage between families of equal status? Of course the emperor needs to be matched with the emperor. Poor people don't have good endings with rich families. System. So, it's been abused like this. This plot of equal status, how could it have a good ending? To facilitate your next reading, you can click at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 328. The following days were more and more difficult to bear. Wei Wei Bai felt that Xia Yunting's eyes were particularly frightening. He moved all the memorials to the palace and told Wei Wei Bai everything. For example, I killed several old officials today. They said they hadn't seen you in a long time and wondered if you had been killed. Wei Wei Bai wore a loose robe, no shoes on her feet, and ankles were tied. She sat in a chair, looking out the window tiredly, as if she had no interest in anything. Xia Yunting didn't care about her reaction. Since that day, his whole person was frighteningly cold. Even when he looked at her, his eyes were cold. Only when he hugged her to sleep would his body soften. A eunuch came and said to Xia Yunting, "The person has been brought." Tai Fu. Xia Yunting coldly said, "Bring him in." The eunuch immediately brought a person in. Wei Wei Bai, who had no interest in anything, finally tensed up. The person brought in was very similar to her. Although there were many differences, but from a distance, the figure and face were at least 80 to 90% similar to her. Xia Yunting saw her looking at the person curiously. I looked for a long time before I found someone similar to you. Of course, he is a man. Wei Wei Bai frowned. You want him to replace me? Xia Yunting was expressionless. He will die in your place. Wei Wei Bai turned to look at him. Die in my place? Xia Yunting's tone was calm. Yes, in 3 days I will kill you with my own hands and then ascend the throne and confer the title of Empress. As long as it wasn't for love, he was still the man who would do anything to achieve his goals, and his actions were swift and decisive. In just a few days, he had already prepared everything. Wei Wei Bai smiled bitterly. She wanted to say something, but in the end she sighed, knowing that she was powerless to reverse the situation. Then she looked at the boy who was similar to her. The boy's face was a little pale. Although he was afraid, he didn't make a sound. He seemed to know that struggling was useless. She looked at him for a while and was about to say something. Xia Yunting threw down his pen. What are you still standing here for? Get out. The eunuch immediately left with his men. During this period of time, the people in the palace were living in an abyss of suffering. The Grand Tutor had a bad temper every day. Xia Yunting didn't look at Wei Wei Bai, fearing that he would see mockery and ridicule on her face. He was still fed up with the feeling of his heart being trampled on. Therefore, he would not reveal his feelings. Even if he was jealous of the substitute just now, he could let her take a few more glances at him. Xia Yunting himself was having a hard time, and he didn't want Wei Wei Bai to have a good time either. He added, Chun Jingji will also participate in our coronation ceremony, but as a prisoner. Wei Wei Bai's face turned pale. She clenched her fists but didn't say anything. Seeing her like this, Xia Yunting snorted coldly. 3 days passed just like that. The system reminded him, it's almost time. Wei Wei Bai was dragged by someone to put on her clothes. It's okay. I'm sure I can finish brushing up on my favorability points. After putting on her clothes, she leisurely walked out. Xia Yunting, who was standing outside, saw her at a glance. This wasn't the first time he saw her in women's clothing. But today was different. She was wearing the Empress' auspicious dress. The red dragon and phoenix robe swayed with her steps. Her figure was graceful, and her every move was refined and noble. Her face was indifferent. Under her slender eyelashes, her eyes were as clear as glass, beautiful and brilliant. His heart thumped. Xia Yunting only felt like he was a thief who had stolen a pearl. He was terrified, but rejoiced. This person was his. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 95. Read the full text. / Download the full text. Read the full text. Chapter 329. Xie Yunting still hadn't put on the emperor's robes because he still had something to do. Zhao Wang was already dead. The military power had fallen into his hands. The court had been purged from top to bottom. And the people of the world, because the previous emperor was mediocre and useless, and he was addicted to women, causing the people to have no way to make a living. As for Xie Yunting taking the throne, no one protested. The dynasty had declined to this point. Xie Yunting was like a savior. If it weren't for Wei Wei Bai, he might have already taken the throne. He took Wei Wei Bai's hand. From today on, there will no longer be a person called Bai Wei in this world. You will no longer be the emperor, you will only be my wife, and also the new empress. Wei Wei Bai's fingers were cold, and even her eyes were cold. She was silent. Xie Yunting's heart was bitter. He would rather hate him, curse him, than see her like this. Wait for me, I'll come pick you up later. Wei Wei Bai turned to leave and suddenly said, How long do you want to tie me up? She moved her foot, and the sound of the chain was heard. Xie Yunting's footsteps slowed. His heart was still a bit uneasy, but thinking that she couldn't escape, he walked back. He reached out and picked her up, placing her in a chair. Then he bent down and lifted her foot, taking out the key to unlock the shackles. With the shackles removed, Wei Wei Bai let out a sigh of relief. Xie Yunting held the chain, softly saying, If you still run, I will still chain you. Wei Wei Bai suddenly lifted her foot, kicking him in the chest. Scram! You traitor! Xie Yunting didn't dodge, forcibly taking her foot. His eyes were still affectionate. You can beat or scold me as long as you like. Saying this, he stared at her. After seeing enough, he got up and walked out again. The system was silent for a moment, then said, From gay to masochist, host really didn't have it easy. Wei Wei Bai, did you go far? System, N. Wei Wei Bai endured the pain and said, Can it be cheaper? 3 days. 3 days for a small packet of powder? The system sighed. Your level is too low. If it weren't for the discount, you wouldn't even have the right to buy the ecstasy potion. Wei Wei Bai said, Forget it, just sprinkle it. She had no power or influence now, and Qin Jingji had no time to fight with Xie Yunting, so he couldn't help. As long as there was the slightest possibility of saving herself, she would not ask for help from the system. The system sprinkled the bewitching drug, and all the people in the palace who were looking at her collapsed one by one. Wei Wei Bai immediately walked out. Along the way, she served whoever she met with the bewitching drug. Without any hindrance, they arrived at the morning court. She saw that on the throne, there was a young man who looked like her. He was wearing the emperor's clothes and was sitting there trembling with fear. There were not many people in the main hall. Once the bewitching drug was used, they all collapsed. Today was a ceremony. Xie Yunting planned to lead the army directly into the palace. Then, he killed the little emperor with a single arrow and crowned himself as emperor. While he was at it, he conferred the title of empress. This was a ceremony that everyone in the world knew about. Xie Yunting had completely rebelled, and the sky had changed. Compared to the beginning, when he planned to wait until she died, then take the abdication edict and take the throne, he was even more decisive, leaving no way out. Wei Wei Bai had long known that Xie Yunting was ruthless. However, it was also unexpected that he would be forced to such a vicious state. When the young man saw her, he said in horror, Did you come to kill me ahead of time? The puppet knew from the beginning that he would die without a doubt, but his fear did not diminish in the slightest. Wei Wei Bai shook her head, then suddenly curved her lips into a smile. Come down and change clothes with us. The young man's face was deathly pale. Change clothes? Wei Wei Bai nodded, looking at him with a smile, a calm and elegant appearance. Chapter 330. Seeing her like this, the young man realized how disgusting his impersonation was. He was not even half as calm as her. He followed her orders and unknowingly changed his clothes with her. Then, Wei Bai sprinkled the aphrodisiac on him and made him lie flat on his back. Wei Bai wore a dragon robe and a crown. A jade bead curtain covered half her face. She sat on the throne with her back straight. Her eyes were indifferent, and her face was calm. "Everyone, I'm going to die," the system said. "You've died so many times. Are you still not used to it?" Wei Bai sighed. "No, there's still a few days left before the 6 months are up. I'm worried that when I die today, the life guarantee will be activated." If it was not for the countdown, the life guarantee would be activated at any time. Even if it was deducted for a few more days, she would not have to go back. It was all deducted. The system said, "It's very painful. I'm worried you won't be able to take it." Wei Bai said, "I have to take it even if I can't. I'm poor." Poor people were not only not qualified to fall in love, they were not even qualified to be comfortable. The system silently looked at the minimum life support grid and hesitated for a moment before blocking it. The pain of the arrow piercing into the body was too torturous. Without life guarantee, it looked for other options. It looked through the discount section of a store and said perfunctorily, "Okay, it won't activate." Wei Bai smiled. "You're so good to me, system." The system was about to laugh and say, "Who are we?" But Wei Bai's next sentence was, "You're not deducting my life points to secretly buy snacks again, are you?" The system said, "Who are we? Am I that kind of system?" Yes, it was that kind of system. Enchanting wore the armor he used to force the abdication. He rode a black horse and led the army into the palace through the open palace gates. His eyebrows were cold, but the bow in his hand was the same bow that Bai Wei had used to shoot him under the red plum tree that day. Today was the real beginning of their relationship. Entering the palace, he saw the main hall. The door was open. He rode his horse to the outside of the hall. His eyes were cold as he pulled the bow in his hand. The person sitting inside was the substitute he had found. The soldiers and civil and military officials behind him all saw the person sitting on the throne. The lonely little emperor, wearing a dragon robe and a crown, looked like she was going to be blown away by the wind. Looking from afar, it was indeed the little emperor. Enchanting didn't look carefully. He was too far away, and he didn't want to see a face similar to Wei Bai's. He was afraid that he would be soft-hearted and lose his aim. He looked at the other side of the main hall, which was the little emperor's palace. She was wearing the empress's clothes and was sitting inside waiting for him to return. Enchanting heard the sound of chains dragging across the ground and looked back.
It was Chen Jingji.
He was wearing a prisoner's uniform and his legs were cuffed. His face was somewhat haggard. Enchanting smiled and said, "Chen Jingji, you should take a good look. Today is the day I force the palace to kill the emperor, the day I ascend the throne and take my wife." It didn't matter that she didn't like him. No matter how hard he tried, one day he would be able to make her soften her stance. As for Chen Jingji, he would leave him a life, and he would slowly torture him. Enchanting expressed that he was such a narrow-minded person who would seek revenge for the smallest flaw. Chen Jingji's wounds hadn't healed yet, and he was dragged here. Based on what he had seen and heard during this time, he speculated and knew what Enchanting was going to do. The one on the throne should be a substitute. Chen Jingji looked up. The sunlight illuminated the main hall, making it glorious. And the person sitting on the throne far away, the vague figure, the barely discernible facial features, was like her. Chen Jingji frowned. Although he couldn't see clearly, that distant feeling was very much like Wei Bai's. Chapter 331. Enchanting still hadn't looked at the substitute on the throne. He knocked an arrow, aiming at the person on the throne. He was very confident in his archery, so he paid more attention to Chen Jingji. Chen Jingji suddenly opened his mouth. "Where did you find such a similar substitute?" Enchanting sneered. The world is so big, I can always find one. Chun Jingji suddenly took several steps forward, as if he wanted to see who was sitting on the throne. Xia Yunting was angry. Just a substitute, this guy wouldn't let it go. Could it be that Chun Jingji liked anyone who looked like him? Annoyed, he let go of the arrow. The arrow flew through the air, shooting at the person on the throne. Chun Jingji suddenly shouted, "Stop, Xia Yunting." Only now did Xia Yunting truly look over. Following the arrow, he saw the person on the throne in the main hall. The golden color on the ground was dazzling to the eye. She sat upright on the throne, wearing a golden dragon robe, her crown gently swaying. Her face was delicate, her expression indifferent and firm. Where was this a substitute? This was clearly the real thing. Xia Yunting felt as if his heart was being crushed by something. His mind went blank, and he screamed, "Dodge!" The horse also rushed in. He madly chased after the arrow he shot. Faster! Faster! He leaned forward, desperately reaching out to grab the arrow's tail. But it was too late. The tip of the arrow pierced through her chest and into her back. Xia Yunting rolled off the horse, scrambling up the steps below the throne. Wei Wei Bai had already fallen from the throne, falling directly into Xia Yunting's arms. Xia Yunting's mind was broken. He held her, not daring to pull the arrow. But the blood couldn't be covered. It seeped through her clothes, a ghastly sight. His face was full of despair. "How did you come out? I shouldn't have let you go. I should have locked you up. I should have locked you up." Wei Wei Bai smiled, powerless and relieved. She opened her mouth, but spat out blood. Her internal organs were shattered, and blood poured out of her windpipe. It was very uncomfortable, but it didn't hurt. Xia Yunting reached out a trembling hand to touch the blood on her lips. "Why do you hate me so much? Do you hate me so much? You'd rather die than stay by my side?" Wei Wei Bai's face was pale as blood gushed out of her mouth. "I don't hate you. I never hated you." Xia Yunting's movements paused, staring blankly at her. Her smile was still bright and beautiful, and her eyes were clear and bright. "You're the person I admire the most." These words were like red plum blossoms in winter, but also like flowers in spring. In any case, they were all beautiful, so beautiful that his tears fell madly. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 98. Xia Yunting's voice was hoarse, his eyes dim to the point of death. His face was full of tears. "If you worship me so much, why don't you love me? Even if you lie to me, I can still give my life to you." She had never been stingy with her kindness. He was like the sun in the sky. His power overturned the world. He was the best in everything. What was wrong with him? Wei Wei Bai's mouth was full of blood, and her face was also covered in blood. She trembled as she reached out to hold his hand. "I love you." Her voice lowered, and she said with a dazed smile. Xia Yunting only felt that his ears were ringing. He was actually hallucinating. But he also felt that this was her pity, lying to him now. How could she be so cruel? But even if he told himself tens of thousands of times that this was fake, his heart still throbbed. She loved him. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 100. Mission completed. The male lead felt that you liked him 5 times. The quota has been used up. Because the mission has been completed, he is exempt from punishment. Ding! The countdown to life is 2 minutes. The host is ready to leave this world. Wei Wei Bai felt the feeling of life slipping away again. She tried to pull herself together. "If I didn't love you, why would I try so hard to encourage you to usurp the throne? You already have no way out. Whether you abdicate or kill Zhao Wang, you can only wait for death if you don't become emperor." Which minister could be at the peak of his power all his life? Only the emperor could. Wei Wei Bai sighed. "I can't love you, Xia Yunting, /" Chapter 332. These words were soft and floated helplessly in the air. Xia Yunting was stunned. He grabbed her hand and said foolishly, "Why not? I won't force you to abdicate. I won't be the emperor. I'm willing to be a servant at your feet, as long as you love me." Wei Wei Bai smiled, blood overflowing from her mouth. Tai Fu is willing to be a servant. He finally couldn't control himself, and his humble pleas were accompanied by cries. I can do anything for you. You hold on, the doctor is coming. As long as you hold on, I'll be your servant. Wei Wei Bai was so weak that she couldn't see anything. Her body still didn't feel any pain, but the passing of life was not fake. She heard the system's countdown. 10-9, but I only want Tai Fu to be high above, high-spirited, a life of glory and wealth. When I first saw you, you were the top scorer in high school, riding a horse through the streets, proud of your success. I hid by the railing of a tall building, broke a flower, and threw it at your head. You turned around and smiled at me. 5 for... She used all her strength to raise her head and smile. Really, seeing Tai Fu, I'll miss you for life. She smiled faintly and planted one last kiss on his trembling lips. 1. The host has left the plane, leaving success. The kiss left as soon as it touched. She closed her eyes and softened. Her breath disappeared, and she quietly lay in Xia Yunting's arms. Xia Yunting also stiffened, not daring to move.
There were more people around.
The doctor also came, but no one dared to come forward. Chen Jingji dragged his leg cuffs and stood to the side, his face pale, but he didn't dare to make a sound. It was as if none of them made a sound. She didn't leave. The air was tense, and the silence was suffocating. Xia Yunting clasped her hand, 10 fingers intertwined, unwilling to separate. He suddenly smiled, and his smile was indescribably mournful and desperate. His tone was as soft as water. I'm not the same. After meeting you, I was doomed. He still remembered the little emperor standing under the white snow and red plum trees, smiling provocatively at him. Those petals flew by, not half as beautiful as she was. At that time, he wondered how there could be such a good-looking person in this world. When Yi Yuxuan opened her eyes, the despair in her eyes was frightening. He stared blankly at the ceiling. He suddenly realized that he was still in a meeting. He had not slept for nearly 3 days. He had been guarding Wei Wei Bai. Because of an important decision, he had to return to the company for a meeting. This was his mission, a simple mission. From the hospital to here, it took him half an hour to drive and an hour to attend a meeting before he finally returned to the hospital. He had only left Wei Wei Bai for 2 hours. Director Yi, do we need to? Yi Yuxuan just closed his eyes to rest for a while. The meeting was coming to an end. When the secretary next to him saw that he had woken up, she was about to ask if the meeting would continue. Yi Yuxuan suddenly stood up. He reached for the suit jacket on the back of the chair. Then he turned around and walked out. Meeting adjourned. His footsteps were somewhat erratic. His head felt like it was being pounded by a hammer, and his head was splitting. There was a voice in his heart that was desperately calling out. Find her. Find her immediately. But he could not remember that woman's face or name at all. Only her voice was familiar. Her voice had almost never changed. Her speed, intonation, and tone could all change. Only her voice didn't change much. He could even simulate the feeling of her voice every time she spoke in his dream. He drove quickly to the hospital. The scenes in his dream along the way were vivid in his mind. It tore at his heart, and it hurt so much that it was bloody. Chapter 333. The scenes from the dream were vivid in his mind. Tearing at his heart, the pain was bloody. The Regent's Little Emperor sequel, when Xia Yunting was 6 years old, he knew what it meant to be sinister. His own mother was drowned alive in the water. He hid in a cave, helplessly watching his mother's body being thrown into the lotus pond. A songstress, no one felt pity for her death. Xia Yunting didn't dare to cry, didn't dare to show his sorrow, because only in this way could the Xia family's matriarch relax her guard. A sad child with eyes full of hatred couldn't live. He began to learn to live humbly. The servants' humiliation, the matriarch's torture, the family's brothers' contempt. It was very difficult for him. He climbed up step by step, each step intertwined with humiliation. He swore he would become a person above others. He wouldn't be trampled under anyone's feet. Year after year passed. He finally held power in his hands. Countless people crowded around him and flattered him. There were even many women who wanted to die for him. Xia Yunting, I can die for you. I only ask you to look at me. Xia Yunting didn't bother to look. Death was death. What he hated the most was this kind of person who loved to and fro at the drop of a hat. If they had time to talk about feelings, it was better to fight for power. His mother was also living well. For his father, she was willing to become a songstress, just to enter the Xia family. Then he was killed by someone else, and even caused him to lead such a miserable life. He wanted power, he wanted money, he didn't want feelings. Forcing the abdication was also because he wanted to stand at the top, no longer kneeling to anyone. In any case, the emperor was so stupid, and the women in the harem were each more stupid than the next. From planning to success, he had only been planning for a few years. The crown prince was a shadow that almost didn't exist. Cowardly and without opinions, too lazy to even look at him. The first time he had an impression of her was the day she didn't attend court after ascending the throne. He aggressively threatened her. No matter how noble her status was, she was still afraid to see him. This kind of power, the feeling of being able to need the most noble person in the country. This was what he wanted. He walked into the palace, but she threw herself into his arms. It hurts. She nestled softly in his arms like a cloud. He rubbed as much as he wanted, but his fingers couldn't help but relax. Compromising once, compromising again and again. Then, she really hid in her heart. Xia Yunting even thought that if this person was willing to smile at him, he would be like his pitiful songstress mother, willing to be trampled by her. But even such a humble wish, he couldn't do it. She said that she only wanted him to be high and mighty, high-spirited, and live a life of wealth and splendor. For this, she would rather not love him and risk her life to make him sit on the high seat and not let him down. Xia Yunting felt that what was the use of these things? She was sitting so high up that she couldn't reach him. He might as well go down into the dust and touch the soles of her shoes.
How nice would that be?
After having her, even power was trash. Chen Jingji entered the palace and saw Xia Yunting coughing as he cleaned Weiwei Bai's memorial tablet. This memorial tablet was made by Xia Yunting himself. Chen Jingji sneered. I asked the imperial physician. You're depressed in your heart. You reap what you sow, and you're going to die. Xia Yunting foolishly looked at the tablet in his hand, touching her name on it. Then, he carefully put it aside. I let you enter the palace because I want to bury me in the tomb after I die. She's been waiting for me for a long time. Chen Jingji said coldly. She doesn't want to see you, and she's still waiting for you? You think too highly of yourself. Xia Yunting didn't feel angry at all. Instead, he was happy to die. Chapter 334. These years, I've done my best to govern this country.
How could she not want to see me?
Xia Yunting finished, mocking. Who is the one who thinks too much? She clearly had nothing to do with you, and you deliberately made me misunderstand. Chen Jingji couldn't refute, because they really had nothing to do with each other. Xia Yunting lay back on the bed, his face haggard, but his eyes were frighteningly bright. I also want to understand that she always loved me. But she couldn't admit it. I killed her father, her brothers, her family, and forced her to a dead end. At this point, Xia Yunting laughed at himself. How could she love me? Love an enemy who took everything from hers? So she always resisted, always hated him. Chen Jingji saw him like this, and said in an evil voice, You really don't deserve her love. She would rather die than let you sit on the throne, because you rode a tiger and couldn't get off. If she was still here, your wolf-like subordinates wouldn't have rebelled. Xia Yunting's breath was weak. She always worshipped me. How could she look down on me? It's not that I didn't become emperor, but I still governed her country well. She was gone. He was still the regent, her regent for life. The throne was empty, with only a white tablet on the dragon throne. No one dared to sit on it. He sat on the dragon throne next to it, pretending that she was still there. Chen Jingji brought tea. leisurely sitting in the chair and drinking. If it weren't for my help, you could easily govern.
Dream on.
Xia Yunting covered the sky with one hand, but he held the leadership of the aristocratic families. At first, he didn't fight because the country was rotten. He was too lazy to fight and let Xia Yunting ruin it. Later, when he wanted to fight, what could Xia Yunting do? If it weren't for her longing for Xia Yunting, Chen Jingji would have fought him to the death. Xia Yunting coldly snorted, but coughed. Chen Jingji, go to hell, don't drag it out. She's already gone. This illness couldn't be saved. Xia Yunting laughed. I'll go after her. When Xia Yunting died, white snow swirled in the air and red plum blossoms bloomed in the imperial palace. The red plum forest was something he had planted for many years. He was a legend of this dynasty. He had won 6 prizes in a row and succeeded in forcing the emperor to abdicate, but he did not become the emperor. He guarded the little emperor who had passed away and was the regent for his entire life. The later generations were amazed, but no one knew the twists and turns in the story. On the night of Xia Yunting's death, Chen Jingji vomited a large mouthful of heart blood. He sighed sadly. It doesn't matter if I'm a few years late. I can't catch up to you anyway. A few years later, he fell ill from overwork and died with a yellowed handkerchief in his hand. It was the one she used to wipe his sweat that year. On the way to escape, in a small hut, she wore camellias on her head. Ruru called him brother. Because of the sudden sound of the horse's hooves, the handkerchief in her hand loosened and fell into his embrace. She forgot to take it back, so he hid it for the rest of his life. He wondered if he would be able to return it to her in his next life. When Yi Yuxuan arrived at the hospital, she suddenly stopped in her tracks. He stood in the corridor with some difficulty breathing, not knowing what he was doing for a moment. His heart was still clenched, and cold sweat kept coming out. This feeling was strange yet familiar. His heart ached again and again for those feelings that had always been absent in his life. But they appeared little by little. He was like an insensible child, at a loss for what to do in the face of these emotions. Suddenly, a familiar voice came from the corner of the corridor. Where's the phone? I'll call my father to tell him I'm safe, and ask him to help me break off my engagement with that unlucky star. This voice was soft and gentle, just like the woman in his dreams.
Tita.
Chapter 335.
Ding.
Strategy successful. Received 1 love point. Wish to extend life by 1 month. -5 days of life support. Use 6 bottles of painkillers. -3 days of life. -5 days of snacks. Remaining 17 days. Please enjoy. The pain of that arrow actually used 6 bottles of painkillers. The last time when she got leukemia, she only used 17 bottles of painkillers, but this time, she used 7 bottles in just a few minutes. No wonder it didn't hurt at all. Wei Bai opened her eyes and saw that she was in the hospital again. She had calmed down. She didn't rush up and scream, nor did she roll off the bed immediately. She needed to talk to the system. Tell me, you've been using my precious life points to buy snacks. There must be a reason. You're not that insensible, system. The system said, I'm hungry. Wei Bai smiled gently. If you're hungry, then spend my life points and kill you. The system was silent for a moment, then pulled a tissue and cried, I need to eat, but the staple food is too expensive. I don't dare to spend too much, so I can only buy snacks. If I don't eat, I'll starve to death. Wei Bai was speechless. The system cried, what can I do? I can't eat, and you don't even give me snacks. I'm hungry every day. Wei Bai asked, how much is the staple food? Crying when eating, was she the kind of person who abused the system and didn't give it food? The system said, a system university's meal costs 1 month of life points, but 5 days of snacks is enough. Wei Bai said, you eat snacks? Yes, she was the kind of person who didn't give the system food. 1 month of life points was eaten by the system. What was the point of her living? She might as well strangle herself with a noodle. Wei Bai saw the nurse coming and asked. Only then did she know that Bai Changyan was discharged from the hospital without any major problems. Her father seemed to have gone home to get her soup. The nurse said with envy, "Your boyfriend has been guarding you for 3 days, but he left for a while because he had something to do." Boyfriend? Oh, Yi Yuxuan. Why was he guarding her? Was he waiting to suck her life points? The thief who stole her life points, shameless bastard. Wei Wei Bai got off the bed to look for her phone. She couldn't help nagging the system when she was in the corridor. "Where's the phone? I'll call my father and tell him I'm safe, and ask him to cancel my engagement with that jinx." Their auras were similar. If she got too close to that guy, her pitiful 10 days of life would be gone. The system suddenly said, "Run." Wei Wei Bai was stunned. She stopped her footsteps. "What's wrong?" "Remember, don't talk to Yuxuan. Don't get close to him. Don't let him touch you. Just run as soon as you see him." Wei Wei Bai Lu was Lu Wei Wei then. She looked up and saw a man walking towards her from the end of the corridor. He was wearing black trousers and a white shirt with a suit jacket in his hand. His footsteps were slightly hurried as he stared at her with his deep, bottomless eyes. A frighteningly tense expression appeared on his handsome face. Wasn't that Yi Yuxuan? Then, she heard a sharp warning sound.
Ding.
Detected original owner Yi Yuxuan. Energy feedback activated, forcibly giving a lifespan reward of 17 days. 16 days, Wei Wei Bai's expression changed. What was going on? They were clearly still a few meters away. The system immediately screamed, "Wei Wei, hurry up and run. His aura is stronger than last time. You can't beat him. If you don't run, all the rewards I gave you will be given to him." Wei Wei Bai cursed. How could there be such an annoying guy in this world? He was simply her jinx. Crossover system. Adonis, come here. Crossover system. Adonis, come here. / crossover system. Adonis, come here. Crossover system. Adonis, come here. Mobile reading. https://m sashu. com / crossover system. Adonis, come here. Chapter 336. She immediately turned around and ran. Behind him came the sound of a quick chase. Yi Yuxuan felt a burning pain in his heart. He stared at the woman in front of him. Was it her? This was the first time he felt so deeply.
Anxiety.
He called out a little awkwardly, "Wei Wei Bai, Wei Wei?" This was his fiancée's name, but he rarely saw her and almost never called her name. This name was clearly something that he had thrown into the trash can of his memory, something that he did not even need to look for to study. But after calling it a few times, he actually felt comfortable. After calling her name repeatedly, the burning pain in his body lessened. He then tried to find the words to describe this feeling. It seemed to be joy. He was joyful. Wei Wei Bai, on the other hand, was going crazy. 15 days, 14 days. Damn it. Why is he chasing after me? Didn't he always turn a blind eye to me? She still remembered the first time they met. He looked up at her and waved his hand. Just throw her out. Yes, the first time they met was in his company. Then she was invited by the security guard and thrown out. She thought that because she looked scary, she would die in the light and would not be this bastard's fiancé. In the end, she received a written notice the next day, saying that she passed the interview and officially became his fiancé. Was this an interview? A written notice? So Yi Yuxuan was a workaholic and emotionless monster. And now this emotionless monster was chasing after her? He even calculated how long it took to walk. Why was he chasing after her? He did not chase before, but now that he should not, he chased after her. She and he were born to be incompatible. Wei Wei. Yi Yuxuan had long legs. One step was several steps for her. He was about to catch up. Wei Wei Bai heard that evil reminder again. 13 days, 12 days. The system said, within 10 meters, your reward will be taken away by him. So hurry up and run away from this distance. Wei Wei Bai screamed, Yi Yuxuan, you jinx, stop chasing me. Her HP was drained away. She was filled with hatred. Yi Yuxuan heard her voice and staggered. She reached out to support herself against the wall of the corridor and watched her escape, without hesitation. In his dream, that woman left just like that. Her silhouette faintly resembled that of the person in his dream. He didn't even know how sorrowful his eyes were as he watched her leave. He had experienced this kind of bone-deep despair too many times. He was even a little numb. Suddenly, his footsteps became frantic. She was about to disappear. Qin Xiu held a cup of coffee in his hand and looked at Wei Wei Bai's medical record while drinking. Wei Wei Bai's body was in good condition, and her heart was relatively stable. There wouldn't be many changes in the short term. It was the strange coma that made him study until all his hair fell out. Suddenly, he looked up and saw Yi Yuxuan's face full of grief, running forward in a panic.
It was Yi Yuxuan, right?
It was that indifferent expression that was actually facial paralysis, deep eyes that were actually dull, elegant steps that were actually as precise as a robot.
Yi Yuxuan, right?
Qin Xiu was stunned. Hey, Yi Yuxuan? Yi Yuxuan was like a gust of wind. Because he was in the way, she directly used her arm to knock him away. Qin Xiu was knocked against the wall, and the coffee in his hand fell to the ground. He stupidly watched the panic-stricken Yi Yuxuan disappear. Address of the full text: https://www.
Sashu.
Com download of the full text: https://www.
Sashu.
Com t. Chapter 337. Then she looked around. Was there a fire or an earthquake, so she needed to escape? No, even if she needed to escape. Yi Yuxuan was also leisurely. I really didn't sleep enough. Even hallucinations appeared. Wei Wei Bai turned a corner and found that Yi Yuxuan didn't chase after her. She immediately covered her chest and leaned against a corridor wall, unable to walk. Her heart was overloaded. She gasped for breath. Damn it, she was going to have a heart attack. Energy feedback mechanism turned off. Deducting 7 days of life. Remaining 10 days of life. Hope the host can cherish it. Wei Wei Bai was very angry. If you want me to cherish it, then don't rob me of my life. The system was alarmed. Yi Yuxuan is catching up again. Wei Wei Bai was frightened. She turned around and saw Yi Yuxuan's spirit appear again. Ding, energy feedback restarted. 9 days. 8 days. Wei Wei Bai held her head in despair. Yi Yuxuan, don't come over. I have an infectious disease. System. Yi Yuxuan. The scene was awkward for a few seconds. Yi Yuxuan stood in the same place. He stared at her. A pair of calm black eyes were tinged with a trace of vitality. It was like water, but also like hope. Call me again. His eardrums were still trembling slightly. Her voice was so familiar that it made his heart beat faster. Wei Wei Bai retreated and said, Okay, I'll call you. Yi Yuxuan, Yi Yuxuan, Yi Yuxuan, get away. Don't come over. Once you enter the 10-meter range, her life will disappear. Yi Yuxuan didn't leave. Instead, he approached her step by step. His voice revealed a trace of desire. Are you dreaming? Wei Wei Bai retreated and was confused. Who doesn't dream? Everyone dreams when they sleep, scientists say. Yi Yuxuan couldn't help but reach out to grab her. Your dream, is it the same as me? Before she could finish her sentence, Wei Wei Bai suddenly collapsed. She clutched her heart. She was having a heart attack. The familiar dull pain, the suffocation of being on the verge of death, caused her to tremble in pain. This damn disease. Yi Yuxuan quickly rushed over and hugged her. The softness in his hand stunned him for a few seconds. The feeling was still so similar to the one in his dream. Wei Wei Bai reached out and grabbed his clothes, looking at him ferociously. The familiar voice kept ringing out. Feedback activated. 8 days, 5 days, 0. The system forcibly bestows a newbie gift package. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 3 days of vegetative state life. You will not be affected by reverse nurturing. Bai Changyan had just walked into the corridor with the soup when he saw his daughter fall into the arms of his future son-in-law. His daughter looked at him with hatred, as if she was looking at a murderer. Suddenly, Wei Wei Bai saw Bai Changyan and used the last of her strength to shout, Dad, I want to break off the engagement. After that, her head tilted and she fell into the familiar darkness. Qin Xiao, who was passing by, happened to hear this sentence. He looked up and saw Yi Yuxuan holding Wei Wei Bai. One fainted with a pale face. The other looked sad and desperate. There was also an old father carrying soup, sluggish at the scene. Qin Xiao, wait, what's going on with this murder scene? Did he miss out on some gossip that was worth hundreds of millions? The soup in by Chengyan's hand suddenly fell to the ground. He trembled and said, Yi Yuxuan, what did you do to my daughter? If something happens to my daughter, I won't let you go even if I become a ghost. Yi Yuxuan looked down at Wei Wei Bai, his eyes unable to move. After a long silence, Yi Yuxuan's cold voice finally came. I'm the one. I won't let her go even if I become a ghost. TD. Chapter 338. Headache, heartache, soul pain. She looked at the ceiling hopelessly. The system waved a little flag of encouragement. Host, hang in there. You still have a lot of time. Wei Wei Bai was dejected. No, I'll just die. What's the point of working so hard on the strategy? I might as well work as a laborer and earn a few $100s a day. So many planes, but not even a day's worth of life points. She even let her own system fall to the point of eating snacks on credit. She was the biggest failure in history, second to none. The system said, work hard to accumulate a few more plane strategies, then I can apply for a mission upgrade project for you. Wei Wei Bai laughed, hee. The system said, how about next time you wake up, just hide and don't come into contact with Yi Yuxuan. Wei Wei Bai was indifferent and continued to be a salted fish. The system racked its brains. After the mission upgrade, the reward will also be upgraded. You have 6 months of life points. Wei Wei Bai repeated blankly, 6 months. The system nodded, yes. Wei Wei Bai sat up abruptly. Then why am I still sleeping? Get up and do it. The system let out a sigh of relief. Wei Wei Bai then noticed her situation. The hotel's presidential suite, the double rolling bed. She was lying on the bed, naked, and in the frosted glass bathroom, there was a well-built man, his back facing her as he took a shower. Bai Weiwei silently stared at the blurred glass, as well as the swaying buttocks inside the glass. So this was her strategy target? The mission target is to obtain So Xian's love. Mission target So Xian. Time for months. The memory was also transmitted. Weiwei Bai's face paled. She reached out to hold her forehead, resisting the discomfort. According to the memory, the man who swayed his butt. His name was Chen Wenfeng, So Xian's archenemy. And her current identity was So Xian's wife. Was she having an affair? Just as she was thinking about this, the bathroom door was pushed open and the man walked out with a towel wrapped around his lower body. His face was handsome, and his eyes were filled with restlessness. He was at least 185 meters tall, and his muscles were well-defined and beautiful. One look, and one could tell that she was an experienced cuckold. You actually woke up? Chen Wenfeng said with a smile. Weiwei Bai had not fully digested the memories, and her expression was a little sluggish. Chen Wenfeng didn't care. After all, Weiwei Bai was famous for being boring. She was known as an old virgin in the circle. She was already married, but she was still a virgin. What a joke. If it weren't for the fact that he wanted to kick her out of the Su family, he wouldn't have cheated on her. Chen Wenfeng walked to the bed and untied the towel. It's good that you're awake. Let's do it. He thought that if he said that, Weiwei Bai would lower her head in fear and shame. She was an old virgin who had never seen a man in her life. In the end, Weiwei Bai lowered her head and slowly sized up his lower body. Suddenly, the corners of her mouth twitched, and she couldn't help but sneer. Chen Wenfeng. Was he being mocked? His masculinity was being mocked by a virgin? Chen Wenfeng rushed to the bed and directly held her with both hands. He sneered. So Xian will be here soon. You better make it sound good, otherwise I'll kill you. Weiwei Bai finally digested the memories. Her world was called Weiwei Bai. She was a conservative and boring woman. She married So Xian because of his grandfather's orders. So Xian was so fed up with her that he slammed the door and left on their wedding night, making her a big joke. She was a virgin for 3 years after she married him. So Xian couldn't wait to divorce her, but because of his grandfather's face, he didn't dare to mention it. And Chen Wenfeng's sister had been coveting the position of So Xian's wife for a long time. She instigated her brother to drug Wei Wei Bai and then caused the fact that he cheated on her so that So Xian had a reason to divorce her. And when she arrived, the original owner was drugged and thrown on the bed. By Wei Wei's side, it was another original owner who was so stupid. She was just about to kick Chen Wenfeng away when the door suddenly opened. A handsome man walked in. His footsteps were casual as his eyes swept over them. "It seems that I've disturbed you." Ding. The male lead's favorability is at -30. Transmigration system. Male god, come here. Transmigration system. Male god, come here. / transmigration system. Male god, come here. Transmigration system. Male god, come here. To make it easier for you to read next time, you can click the button at the bottom to record the reading record. You can see it when you open the bookshelf next time. If you like Transmigration system, Male god, come here. Chapter 339. Yi Yuxuan? Yuxuan? Xian? Little baby? Big cutie? Fuck, do you want me to give you a needle? Why can't you wake up? Yi Yuxuan only felt that his eyelids were unusually heavy. He heard Qin Xiu's voice, chattering, and there was a strange irritation in his heart. Irritable, Yi Yuxuan finally opened his eyes. He quickly looked at the bed. The woman on the bed was lying quietly. Her eyebrows and eyes were calm, and there was no quickness when she opened her eyes. But she was quiet and unusually soft. Qin Xiu glanced at his hand. "What are you doing with your hand on Wei Wei Bai's stomach?" Yi Yuxuan pondered for a while, and then said flatly, "I always feel that I have a child with her, in the belly." Qin Xiu. The air was quiet for about a minute. Qin Xiu suddenly pushed Yi Yuxuan away and pointed at his nose angrily. "Yi Yuxuan, you beast, how can you take advantage of people when they are in danger? You can even lay your hands on a person in a vegetative state and even kill him. God, is this world devoid of morality, or is it devoid of humanity?" Yi Yuxuan was silent for a few seconds before he understood what he meant. He opened his mouth to make it clear. Qin Xiu had already reached out to carry Wei Wei Bai. "No, I can't handle the pregnancy. I'll take the pregnant woman to the gynecologist first." Yi Yuxuan reached out, gently grabbed the back collar of his white coat, and pulled hard. Qin Xiu couldn't control his whole body and staggered back, directly hitting the wall. Then Yi Yuxuan reached out and covered Wei Wei Bai with the quilt again. His eyes flashed with a lot of emotions, entangled into a feeling that even he couldn't understand. Yi Yuxuan had read a lot of books during this time, all about emotional analysis. His emotions would only be stirred up by one person. Facing Qin Xiu was good. Facing anyone was the same. He still had no feelings. But as long as he was by Wei Wei Bai's side, he was sure that he was the woman in his dreams. The emotions hidden in his body that had long since died. They were all revived and awakened. It was like a ferocious beast that had been lurking for more than 20 years. He finally opened his eyes. Qin Xiu covered his head that was hit. "If you're pregnant, you need to see a doctor." "Why did you push me?" Yi Yuxuan said calmly. "It's flowing again." Qin Xiu. He had to slow down. Because of Wei Wei Bai's drowsiness, he had the habit of checking her body every day. She wasn't pregnant yesterday. She was pregnant and had a miscarriage today? Yi Yuxuan added, in a dream. Qin Xiu. Fuck, can you not speak with such a big breath? Did I give you an orgasm in my dream? Qin Xiu felt that he was going to have a nervous breakdown. So, in the dream, you married Wei Wei Bai, got pregnant, and had a miscarriage? Don't tell me you'll still die a horrible death in the end? Yi Yuxuan was silent, and silent again. Qin Xiu, what's with this dark atmosphere? It's cold. Finally, Yi Yuxuan said, he's crazy. The abandoned ex-wife of the Red Second Generation follow-up, so Xian didn't come to Wei Wei Bai's funeral. Chen Wenfeng took care of everything. He wore a black trench coat, lost a lot of weight, and the outline of his face was fierce and cold. The funeral went smoothly. Some people felt pity, some were sad. Some were perfunctory, some were calm. Chen Wenfeng stayed at the funeral until the end. In the end, even the sad old master Su left. He was the only one standing in front of the tombstone. On the tombstone, her portrait was the gloomy appearance before she changed. He later realized that Wei Bai, who suddenly changed her temperament, didn't leave any photos for them. Collect. Chapter 340. It was as if she came and left. It was so easy and left no trace. My sister, Chen Wenfeng finally said, my sister has been paranoid since she was a child, so after she fell in love with So Xian, she went crazy. She was really crazy. She would do anything for love. When she heard that So Xian fell in love with Wei Bai, not only did she collude with Su Tang to sell their information, but in the end, she failed and directly took the gun from the United States. She guarded So Xian's door just to kill Wei Bai. I didn't let her get bail, because of mental illness. Instead, I let her go to prison to repent for the rest of her life. For Shenxia, death was not terrible. The most terrible thing was to be in prison for the rest of her life. Whether it is me or So Xian, we are all scum who hurt you. You could have lived a happy life. Speaking of this, Chen Wenfeng suddenly felt a little sour. He looked up at the sky and said with a choked voice, if only you had never met us. If she had not met them, Wei Bai would not have fallen in love with So Xian. If she had not met them, Wei Bai would not have been able to pull herself together, only to lose her life because of his sister's madness. They were all murderers. No one was an exception. Chen Wenfeng never knew that he could love someone so deeply. And when she died, he really realized that after losing her, other than being full of regret, everything else had lost its meaning. Without her, he was just a walking corpse for the rest of his life. The next morning, Chen Wenfeng left with dew all over his body. So Xian still did not appear. Chen Wenfeng also knew how much courage it took to face this funeral. So Xian obviously did not have this courage. But 1 day passed. 2 days. 1 week. 1 month. So Xian still did not appear. Chen Wenfeng finally felt that something was wrong. He knocked on So Xian's door. It was the nanny who opened the door. So Xian's? Chen Wenfeng was really angry. It was already too much for him not to show up on the day of the funeral. A month had passed, and he hadn't even gone to the cemetery to take a look. When people leave, the tea cools down. Su Xian was getting cold too fast. The nanny was a little scared and didn't know what to say, so she could only turn around and let Chen Wenfeng in. Chen Wenfeng stormed in with a gloomy face. The air was filled with a sweet smell. Chen Wenfeng suddenly stopped in his tracks. There were a lot of candied haws in the house. They were all inserted into the straw targets, decorating the entire room with a terrifying red fire. Then he saw So Xian sitting on the sofa. His face was very pale, very unnaturally pale. His body was surprisingly thin. So Xian's sharp spiritual aura had disappeared in less than half a month. There was only fatigue, haggardness, and a strange smile on his face. He said softly to the air, Wei, I bought some candied haws today. You can eat 2 more. Chen Wenfeng stood in place. Suddenly, his anger turned into sorrow. So Xian acted as if he couldn't see Chen Wenfeng. He picked up a piece of candied haws and handed it to the empty space. But you can only eat 2, otherwise you won't be able to eat. It's not good for your health. Chen Wenfeng glanced at the empty space. Suddenly, tears welled up. Chen Wenfeng clenched his teeth and said, So Xian, wake up. So Xian treated Chen Wenfeng as air. In his eyes, Wei Bai was smiling sweetly and saying to him, So Xian, you bought so many candied haws, but I can only eat 2. Aren't you too stingy? Download. Chapter 341. So Xian smiled gently. I'm afraid you'll be too full. If you really want to eat, I'll help you eat it. You can kiss me and it'll be the same as eating it. How can you be so shameless? As long as I want you, my face is not important. Wei Wei Bai suddenly leaned forward and bit the candied haws. After eating one, she said, I'll eat it myself. I don't need you to feed me. So Xian also bit the candied haws and ate them one by one, smiling happily. It's delicious, Wei Wei. Shen Wenfeng felt that he should calm down. So Xian kept talking to himself. He even answered his own question. He heard So Xian say again, let's go to Europe and have another wedding, okay? After a pause, So Xian's voice was soft and sharp. His tone was imitating Wei Wei Bai's rhythm. Europe is too far away. Let's have the wedding in front of our house. So Xian recovered his voice, as long as you like it. Shen Wenfeng walked in front of him and squatted down to look into So Xian's eyes. He said word by word, So Xian, wake up. So Xian's eyes were not focused. After he finished eating the candied haws in his hand, he reached for another one. Shen Wenfeng suddenly couldn't bear it anymore. He reached out and took the candied haws in his hand and threw them away. Then he grabbed Su Xian's collar and shook him fiercely. Su Xian, you motherfucker, wake up. You coward who doesn't dare to face the reality. She is dead. She is not here. In the end, Shen Wenfeng was crying. After Wei Wei Bai's death, he was in a state of collapse. But there were too many things to deal with. He could only force himself to deal with everything. But today, seeing So Xian like this, Shen Wenfeng found that he couldn't hold on anymore. So Xian was confused for a while before he recognized the person in front of him. Rotten Shen, didn't you say you wouldn't pester Wei Wei anymore? Why did you come to my house? Shen Wenfeng said, I came to your house to beat you up. After that, he clenched his fist and punched him in the face. So Xian was punched by him until blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Shen Wenfeng punched him again. He staggered several steps and almost couldn't stand still. His fist wasn't enough, he even used his foot. Su Xian was finally enraged. He suddenly went crazy and fought with Shen Wenfeng. The two of them were like wounded lone wolves, fighting and beating each other. It's as if they won't stop until they kill each other. Shen Wenfeng's face was covered with blood. He cursed sarcastically. Where is Wei Wei? Where is she? Are you addicted to act? She's dead, so you trash. A piece of trash. Su Si and didn't want to listen. He subconsciously rejected these words. Where is Wei Wei? Of course she's at home, by his side. He frantically attacked Shen Wenfeng. The things in the house were smashed beyond recognition. Shen Wenfeng pushed the candied haws to the ground and trampled them. So Xian was suddenly shocked. He quickly went to save the candied haws. Wei Wei likes to eat, don't break them. Shen Wenfeng suddenly couldn't step on them. He lost all his strength and stood there blankly. So Xian quickly went to pick up the candied haws. 1, 2, 3. Tears suddenly dripped down. He lowered his head and tears crazily poured out. Shen Wenfeng also turned his head away. His face was full of tears. The two big men faced the messy house and the broken candied haws and cried their hearts out. Shen Wenfeng's arrival woke So Xian up. He whispered, Wei Wei is dead. Shen Wenfeng said, yes. So Xian got up with a pale face and then went to take a shower and change clothes. Shen Wenfeng saw him reappear. He was wearing a black suit with a pink corsage. Su Xian collected the intact candied haws and carefully wrapped them with wrapping paper, turning them into a large number of candied haws flower shapes. Let's go, I'm going to see her.
Tea.
Chapter 342. Shen Wenfeng looked at his clothes, his heart filled with bitterness. Wei Wei Bai was wearing a wedding dress before she died. At that time, she had already forgiven So Xian and even wanted to start over with him. So Xian wearing this today was also an answer to Wei Wei Bai. She wanted to start over.
He also wanted to.
They came to the cemetery. So Xian said, I'll stay with Wei Wei for a while. You go away. Shen Wenfeng coldly snorted and finally walked further away. So Xian put the candied haws in his hand in front of her grave. He didn't speak, just stood there and looked at the tombstone. After a long time, he suddenly laughed. Wei Wei, me too. I suddenly feel that the person I should marry in this life is you. Chen Wenfeng has been standing not far away, and he didn't listen to what So Xian was saying. There was a heavy premonition in his heart. He took out a cigarette, lit one with trembling fingers, and was just about to smoke. Bang! A gunshot sounded behind him. Chen Wenfeng's fingers stiffened, and he suddenly didn't dare to look back. He took a puff and couldn't stop, one puff after another. When he finished smoking, Chen Wenfeng knew that he couldn't escape from reality. He looked back and saw So Xian fell in front of Wei Wei Bai's grave. The tombstone was filled with the blood that gushed out of his skull after he committed suicide by shooting himself. Chen Wenfeng felt that this picture was a nightmare that he couldn't get rid of. He stood there for a long time, his eyes blank and desperate. Finally, he took a deep breath and laughed at himself. You two left so casually, leaving me to live and bear the responsibility, not thinking about how I should live in the future. This is really a bastard. Qin Xiu deeply touched his face. He always felt that the cannon fodder in the dream was very miserable. Of course, this is not the point. The point is, you're so thirsty that you want to dream of having sex with a girl, having children, and getting married? What kind of dreams have you had recently? None of them were normal. Yi Yuxuan frowned. I always feel like there's no real feeling when we make love. Although the man in the dream was very happy, but he didn't feel anything. It was as if they weren't in bed. Qin Xiu, do you need to feel real when you have a dream? He might as well masturbate himself. Furthermore, he clearly couldn't remember the face of the woman in his dreams, but he would replace Wei Wei Bai with her every day. Who would believe that he did not have a crush on Wei Wei Bai? Wei Wei Bai was half awake. He seemed to hear someone talking beside him. The system's voice sounded tired. That jinx of yours is by your side. Listen to me first before you wake up. Otherwise, that little bit of life points will be sucked away again. Wei Wei Bai immediately grasped the main point. How little is my HP? The system remained silent for a while. You have to stay calm. Wei Wei Bai was expressionless. I'm very calm. The system said, reward 30 days of life points. Deduct 10 days of continuation pills, 3 days of painkillers, 5 days of system repair, 10 days of discount for poor people, 10 days of expired discount. If you don't die from eating, consider me a poor loser. You have 2 days of life points left. Wei Wei Bai. What the hell is a spicy loser? Does the poor have to die? You discriminated against the poor because your ancestors didn't farm for 3 generations. No, the point was 2 days. Bai Weiwei's face was expressionless. I won't wake up. I won't wake up. Don't wake me up. What could he do in 2 days? It was not enough for Yi Yuxuan to take 2 breaths. The system said, I have a way to increase your HP when you wake up, but it's very risky. Wei Wei Bai, ? The system said, Yi Yuxuan's HP is enough to save the entire Earth. His aura is strong enough to scare the entire universe. Wei Wei Bai said, so? The system said, so. Open your eyes and steal his HP. Wei Wei Bai was shocked. There was such a thing. How do I do that? The system roared, push him against the wall and kiss him. Comma. Chapter 343. Cabot in him. Kiss him? Wei Wei Bai expressed that this method of robbery was very flirtatious. She needed to eat a spicy stick to calm herself down. This won't do. Last time, this bastard forcefully kissed me, causing my HP to be snatched away. If I kiss him, won't I be giving him my life points for free? Wei Wei Bai expressed that she did not have amnesia. The system said earnestly, that's because you haven't used my method yet. Not only kiss him, but force yourself on him, confess to him, flirt with him crazily. You can do whatever you want. In any case, you must make Yi Yuxuan's emotions fluctuate. Wei Wei Bai expressed, I don't understand. The system said, to put it bluntly, Yi Yuxuan is a treasure trove. If you want to take his life points, you need to get his permission. Seeing that Wei Wei Bai was still thinking, the system continued to explain, it's not that he says yes, it's his subconscious that agrees. For example, if you can kiss him until he is as happy as being electrocuted, he will open up his life points, and I can take some for you. Wei Wei Bai said. What if I kiss him and he's indifferent? The system said, your life points will be sucked away by him. Even if you manage to trigger his emotions and steal some of his life points, when he calms down, your life points will still be sucked away by him. Wei Wei Bai, damn. That's why this stupid method doesn't work at all. Who can keep a man excited? Even a dozen Viagra won't be able to do it. The system said, that's why I'll let you receive the newbie gift pack and sleep for 3 days after you steal enough life points to preserve the life points you steal. This method, Wei Wei Bai began to think about the pros and cons. The system said, this is already the best method. Once you've accumulated enough life points, you can sleep to complete the mission. After a few repetitions, you'll have a lot of life points and won't have to worry about dying at any time. Wei Wei Bai finally nodded. That's fine. Wait until I get 100 years worth of HP. I'll kick Yi Yuxuan far away. When that happens, I'll be able to survive. System. Burning the bridge after crossing the river, by Wei Wei, as long as his mood fluctuates and he's happy? The system said, not only that, you can make him cry and suffer the same effect. But now that you've caused Yi Yuxuan pain, after you fall asleep, you can't control whether or not he'll fill your body with cement and sink it into the sea. So, let's just let him be happy. The effect will be the same anyway. Wei Wei Bai was just about to nod when she realized that she had regained consciousness. She heard Qin Qiu's voice.
Huh?
Wei Wei Bai's fingers are moving. Is she waking up? Yi Yuxuan, Bai Wei Wei heard the familiar sound of a system prompt from him, and, ding, detected the original owner, Yi Yuxuan. Energy feedback activated, forcibly giving out bonus lifespan. Wei Wei Bai was so shocked that she immediately opened her eyes and sat up. She looked up and saw Yi Yuxuan standing by the bed. The handsome and cold man stared at her with a pair of calm eyes, deep and bottomless. When he saw that she had woken up, there was a ripple in those calm and deep eyes. Wei Wei Bai had been sick for a long time and was pale, but it did not diminish the light in her eyes. Her eyes were filled with a high desire to attack. 2 days. 1 day. There was no hesitation, no time to think. Wei Wei Bai's mind was only filled with Yi Yuxuan's lips and how to make a man happy. It was too late to joke. She could only forcefully push him against the wall and seduce him. Wei Wei Bai suddenly got off the bed and overestimated her own body. Her legs went soft, and she fell into Yi Yuxuan's arms. Chapter 344. By Changyan. Tired? There was a lot of information in this sentence. Wasn't his daughter sleeping? How could she be tired? Was she tired because Yi Yuxuan just did that to her? Yi Yuxuan was too lazy to pay attention to others. His fingers gently pushed aside the hair on her face. Then, as if nothing had happened, as if he had learned a new skill, he bowed his head and kissed her lips. This kind of action was natural. He couldn't help but kiss her again and again. Qin Qiu's whole person was not good. He rushed over and hugged Bai Changyan, who was about to beat Yi Yuxuan to death. He desperately explained, nothing, he didn't do anything. Uncle, listen to me, it was your daughter who moved first, really. Bai Changyan roared and pounded Qin Qiu's back hard. Cancel the engagement. Cancel. Let go of me. You colluding wolf cub. Qin Qiu burst into tears. Other people loved him while he was beaten. Why was it so difficult for single people in this world to live? Also, damn Yi Yuxuan, don't kiss anymore. He was going to be beaten to death. Help. Successfully enter the plane. The goal of this mission is to get the love of Ning Yishu. Target mission, Ning Yishu. Completion rate, 0. Time, 16 months. Wei Wei Bai just heard the reminder. She smelled blood. She looked up and was surprised. In front of her on the wooden shelf, there was a badly mutilated man hanging. His body was slender, but you could see the youthfulness of a teenager. It was impossible to tell what his face originally looked like. He was beaten black and blue. Wei Wei Bai. According to the system's nature, this man who was beaten half to death couldn't be Ning Yishu? Suddenly, that man looked up. His eyes were very deep, flashing with the brilliance of stars. Even if he was beaten to this point, it didn't damage the spirit in his eyes. It was simply the bearing of a protagonist. Ding, the male lead's favorability is 3. Her favorable impression of him was 3. It wasn't -3, it was 3. Wei Wei Bai only felt that she had saved the Milky Way galaxy. She actually transmigrated to a world where the male lead's favorability was not negative. She felt that she had to slow down, lest she die of happiness. This was the first time in history. Then she lowered her head and looked at the whip in her hand. It was obvious that the original owner was tormenting the target. Even after being tortured to such an extent, he still had 3 favorable impression points. This was simply true love. Before Wei Wei Bai could look at the memory sent by the system, this badly mutilated man suddenly opened his thin lips. Master, this disciple knows his wrongs. Master, Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but tremble. As soon as she arrived, she encountered the original owner. If this continued, Ning Yishu's favorability would go negative. She had to quickly put him down. Since his favorability was at 3, she could use her love to influence him and make his favorability rise to 100. Wei Wei Bai threw away the whip in her hand and was about to untie the rope. The system suddenly said, "The side mission is forcibly bound and cannot be rejected. Side mission, please maintain the storyline of the world. The host cannot change her personality. If you fail, the 9th heaven Xian Thunder will strike your entire family. You, the system, your father, sister, and ancestral graves will all be struck." Wei Wei Bai. What did that mean? She was stupid and didn't understand. This punishment was continuous. Striking her sister was bad enough, but now he was striking her father. Could he be more shameless? Then she finally had the time to look at the memory sent by the system.
/
Chapter 345. Originally, when she heard that Ning Yishu's favorability was at 3, she couldn't help but smile. However, when she finished reading the memories, the smile on her face slowly became sluggish. Her expression also slowly turned cold. In the end, she maintained the 2 emojis of, "Are you fucking kidding me?" and "No, I must be dreaming." She thought that encountering the system was already the most bizarre thing. She didn't expect that one day she would be able to transmigrate to another plane. The system didn't send her memories at all, but a novel. The title of the novel was The Unique and Unhindered Immortal Path. The male lead was called Ning Yishu, the typical male lead of a novel. His life was bleak, and he was a jinx who caused the death of his entire family. He grew up like a beggar under the disdainful gazes of others. Later, by chance, he entered Grand Heaven's Mountain and became Wei Wei Bai's disciple. Ning Yishu's spirit root was different from others. Others had metal, wood, water, fire, earth, and so on. He was the only one with a pure yang body. When Grand Heaven's Mountain tested his spirit root, they didn't see this kind of spirit root, so they mistakenly tested it as a fire spirit root. Ning Yishu thought that if he became Wei Wei Bai's disciple, his path would be smooth. However, there was a special part about his pure yang body. It was that when he was a virgin, he couldn't cultivate it all. Soon, Wei Wei Bai discovered that he was a piece of trash who couldn't cultivate. In her anger, she tortured and humiliated him every day. She even let others bully and suppress him. Ning Yishu endured the humiliation and felt extremely inferior, so he didn't dare to resist. Until Wei Wei Bai reached a bottleneck in her cultivation, she needed a kind of elixir to help her. That elixir required a person with a single fire spirit root as a catalyst. Therefore, Wei Wei Bai didn't hesitate to throw Ning Yishu into the furnace to refine the elixir. Ning Yishu obviously wouldn't die like that. In his rage, he activated his pure yang cheat, broke open the furnace, and escaped. In the end, he was hit by the furious Wei Wei Bai and fell off the cliff. At this point, the story was only 1/10 of the beginning. Like all the male protagonists in Shuang novels, he fell off a cliff and encountered a great adventure. Ning Yishu began his counterattack and began a path of face-slapping. He destroyed Grand Heaven's Mountain. He skinned and cut off Wei Wei Bai's flesh to refine it into a pill. Their souls were also extracted and refined, and they were tortured for eternity, unable to reincarnate. When Bai Weiwei saw this, she expressed that her whole person was not good. The rest of the story had nothing to do with her. In any case, Ning Yishu was noble, elegant, and down-to-earth. He did all the things that a straightforward male lead would do. Take in underlings, flirt with beauties, and fight bosses. The standard ending was to successfully break through the void and ascend to immortality. This was the plot of the entire book, the unique and unique. And she was obviously not wearing an ordinary plane. Instead, he had transmigrated into this book. Fortunately, when she transmigrated, the story had yet to unfold. Ning Yishu had only been under her tutelage for a year. The original owner had yet to refine Ning Yishu into pills and throw him off the cliff. Ning Yishu had yet to go on a killing spree, and neither had he skinned her to refine pills. Unfortunately, the original owner had already beaten, scolded, and tortured Ning Yishu for a year. And 3 months later, she was going to refine the male lead into pills. At the beginning, Ning Yishu admired his master, and the 30 points of favorability he had generated were now almost gone. Wei Wei Bai knocked on the system. So this is a book? Then I have to maintain my character of torturing the main character, throw him off the cliff, and wait for him to come back and skin me alive? The system said, in theory, yes. Wei Wei Bai said, there's something I don't know. The system said, don't say it. Wei Wei Bai. The system added, this is a special plane. You can't change the plot of this book. When conquering this world, you can't easily change the original owner's character. Wei Wei Bai asked, what's the original owner's character? The system said, she's cruel and ruthless. She's a villain in the early stages of the book who tortures Ning Yishu every day for fun. Wei Wei Bai thought, damn, how do we conquer this? Who would fall in love with a vicious woman who tortures him every day and wants to refine him into pills? The transmigration system, Prince Charming, come here. The transmigration system, Prince Charming, come here. Transmigration system, Prince Charming, come here. The transmigration system, Prince Charming, come here. / you can see it the next time you open the bookshelf. Chapter 346. The most difficult world to conquer in history. No other. Wei Wei Bai held back her anger and suddenly reached out to untie Ning Yishu's ropes. Ning Yishu seemed to feel it and slowly looked at her. Master, you're not going to hit him? The system reminded her, the original owner's personality would not be gentle to Ning Yishu. Do you want to break your character settings and be struck by lightning? Wei Wei Bai's fingers stiffened for a long time, and 10,000 curses ran through her mind. In the end, she struggled to pull her hand back and then ignored Ning Yishu and turned to leave. She was really worried that she would break her character settings and be struck by lightning. The hope in Ning Yishu's eyes dimmed. He saw Bai Weiwei, dressed in white and as beautiful as a fairy, leave. She was extremely cold, and when she looked at him, her eyes were filled with disgust. Sure enough, no one in this world would like him. Ning Yishu's insistence on the light in his heart finally collapsed under Wei Wei Bai's disgust. He slowly revealed a desperate smile. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 0. Wei Wei Bai heard the favorability notification, and her tears almost fell. If she could change the plot, she would put him down and coax him in her arms. If she was a bit nicer to him, his favorability would reach 100. How was she going to conquer this? This was the first time she had no confidence in the mission. Suddenly, Wei Wei Bai stopped. Not breaking my character settings, does it mean not breaking in front of Ning Yishu or in front of everyone? The system flipped through the guide. It's fine as long as you don't break in front of the protagonist. Wei Wei Bai let out a sigh of relief. Why didn't you say so earlier? She suddenly pointed at a disciple passing by. Go put Ning Yishu down and treat him properly. The disciple was a bit surprised. Yes, Martial Granduncle. Wei Wei Bai was at nascent soul stage and had a very high status. All the disciples had to call her Martial Grandaunt. Wei Wei Bai was afraid that her image would be exposed in front of Ning Yishu, so she specifically instructed, "Don't tell him that it was my order." The disciple did his duty and acknowledged. After the disciple left, Wei Wei Bai quietly followed him. That disciple put Ning Yishu down from the wooden frame. "Let's go. I'll take you to treatment." In Ning Yishu's gloomy eyes, there was not a single ripple. He coldly sized up that disciple. This was someone who had bullied him before. "What is your purpose?" The disciple suddenly sneered. If it weren't for Marshal Granduncle's instructions, halfway through a sentence, he suddenly remembered Wei Wei Bai's instructions and immediately shut his mouth. Then, he angrily pushed Ning Yishu to the ground. "You inauspicious piece of trash. I was kind enough to bring you for treatment, but you're being pretentious." Ning Yishu's body was extremely weak from the torture. He fell to the ground and had no strength left. He could only let that disciple kick him. His face revealed a pained expression, but he did not make a sound. His eyes gradually turned cold as a cold lake. Wei Wei Bai said, "I seem to see a future where I will die miserably in the future." When Ning Yishu returned, this place where everyone bullied him would definitely be destroyed by him. And she, the one who bullied him the most, would definitely die the most miserable death. The system said coldly, "I believe that you can succeed in your counterattack. I'll cheer you on mentally." Wei Wei Bai. She did not expect anything from this piece of trash system. She could only pull an accessory from her waist. Her body naturally knew how to use spiritual energy. She raised her hand. The accessory broke through the air, passed through the window, and hit the disciple hard. The disciple let out a scream and fainted. Wei Wei Bai did not expect that she would have such strong strength. Ning Yishu almost immediately realized that someone was outside the window. He rushed to the window. Wei Wei Bai immediately ran out. If he knew that she had saved him, his character would have collapsed. Chapter 347. Ning Yishu did not see anyone, and his body could not take it anymore. He was afraid that others would misunderstand that he was the one who knocked out this disciple. At that time, an even more terrible punishment would definitely be added to his head. Ning Yishu thought of Wei Wei Bai's cold figure as she left. A trace of hatred finally flashed through his eyes. Why did everyone bully him? Was it because he was a good-for-nothing? Ding! The male lead's favorability is at -5. Ning Yishu stumbled as he was about to leave, but suddenly stopped. He saw the jade pendant with a light green tassel on the ground. It looked familiar. Who saved him? Ning Yishu reached out and picked up the jade pendant before leaving. With great difficulty, he returned to his dilapidated little house. He felt cold, and there were wounds all over his body. The pain of his flesh splitting open tormented him until he began to roll around. He bit the blanket, enduring until he broke out in cold sweat. Ning Yishu had been bullied since he was young, and he always wanted to escape this fate. When the cultivators passing by said that he had spirit roots, he was so happy that he forgot himself. He thought that by entering Grand Heaven's Mountain and taking Wei Wei Bai as his master, he could escape his fate of being bullied. In the end, he fell into an even deeper hell. Tears suddenly flowed out of his eyes. Ning Yishu stared fiercely at the wall. He was not willing. He was not willing to be tortured to death like this. His wounds were too heavy, and he soon lost consciousness. The high fever made him muddle-headed. Wei Wei Bai waited outside for most of the night, and finally Ning Yishu became confused. Only then did she enter the room like a cat and reach out to touch his forehead. This high fever could burn a genius into a fool. Wei Wei Bai took out the healing medicine unique to this cultivation world and fed it to Ning Yishu. She could not help but complain to the system, "This won't increase favorability." Nonsense, Ning Yishu did not even know who she was. How could she increase favorability? The system retorted, "Then what are you doing?" Wei Wei Bai sighed. Let him have a better impression of Grand Heaven's Mountain. In the future, when he thinks that someone is here to save him, his mood will improve, and I'll die a better death. After Ning Yishu drank the medicine, He moaned comfortably. Wei Wei Bai reached out and touched his forehead. The fever was almost gone, and the wound was healing at a visible rate. It was indeed a cultivation plane. How illogical. Suddenly, her hand was grabbed by Ningishu. He opened his eyes in confusion.
Who?
When he was in so much pain and despair, an incomparably cool power healed his wounds. He felt someone gently caressing his forehead. This gentleness shook his wounded heart. This kind of gentleness was simply a kind of bright salvation to those who were in the dark hell. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 0. Wei Wei Bai was shocked. Even if he doesn't know that I saved him, his favorability would increase? The system flipped through the information again. Yes, even if he doesn't know who you are, his favorability towards you is directly added to your head. Wei Wei Bai said, then I'll help him in the dark every day. His favorability will increase. The system said earnestly, don't be found out, just violate the character setting. Wei Wei Bai was about to nod when she realized that Ningishu's eyes were already open. His eyes were extremely clear. Why did you save me? Wei Wei Bai was shocked. She immediately shook off his hand and turned to leave. Ningishu was anxious. He reached out to grab her, but only managed to grab a corner of her skirt.
He tore a piece off.
The air was filled with a faint fragrance. This fragrance made him frown. Why was it so familiar? He remembered that the person who saved him was a woman. She was wearing a veil, so he could not see her face clearly. But he could feel that she was a very beautiful woman. In this grand heavens mountain, the most beautiful woman was undoubtedly Wei Wei Bai. But Ningishu sneered. His master hated him, so why would she save him? Then he finally saw the color of the skirt in his hand. It was white. Chapter 348. Wei Wei Bai did not know that her skirt had already aroused Ningishu's suspicion. She was still discussing the loopholes of the side quest with the system. In the novel, Wei Wei Bai's character is stupid and bad. She's the perfect example of a cannon fodder whose brain was eaten by a dog. In other words, as long as I maintain this impression in front of Ningishu, I won't violate the character setting, right? The system said, yes, you just have to make sure that you finish the storyline and make Ningishu think that you're stupid and bad. As for the others, they have nothing to do with your side quest, so you can do whatever you want. Wei Wei Bai thought seriously. With the original owner's personality, would she suddenly fall in love with Ningishu? The system said, don't think about such impossible things. Ningishu is just a child in the original owner's eyes. Wei Wei Bai suddenly remembered. How old am I? Nascent soul stage seemed to take a long time to cultivate. The system said, more than 100 years old. More than 100, more than 100, more than 100 years old? The system kindly reminded, Ningishu is only 18. Wei Wei Bai clutched her chest. Was this an old cow eating young grass? No, this was the witch of the Black Mountain fetish. This age difference was not cute at all. The system said, it's okay. The cultivation world goes on for thousands of years. Time flies like a white horse, passing in the blink of an eye. 100 years old is the age of a budding girl in the cultivation world. Wei Wei Bai said, then what is the 18-year-old Ningishu? A fertilized egg? The system was speechless. Wei Wei Bai said, my storyline is when Ningishu is in Grand Heavens Mountain. I have to torture him and beat him up every day. 3 months later, I have to use him for alchemy and make sure that the quality of the alchemy furnace is tofu so that he can escape, and when he escapes to the edge of the cliff, I have to accurately hit him down with a palm strike. In this book, Bai Weiwei was a little villain with a thin character. That was all her plots added up to. Weiwei Bai expressed that there were tens of thousands of novels, but there were only a few routines. The villains had to target the protagonist for no reason. The protagonist would jump off cliffs and mountains at the drop of a hat and run into an old grandpa or an exotic flower or a mythical unicorn. Then, he used his cheats all the way, crushing the villains, becoming immortals and gods, and reaching the peak. Can't you be a little more creative? The system replied, yes, that's basically it. Weiwei Bai, what if I kiss him when I hit him? The system said, your character settings will collapse. Wei Wei Bai, what if you have no other choice? Question mark? Wei Wei Bai, so you're saying that I'm unscrupulous and ruthless, right? System, this is the first time I've heard someone describe themselves in such a refreshing and refined manner. Wei Wei Bai, then what if I'm accidentally poisoned or possessed, and I need the pure yang body to relieve it? If I have no other choice but to pounce on Ningishu, wouldn't that not collapse my character settings? The system was dumbfounded. How did the host even think of this? Normally, when people heard that they couldn't collapse their character settings, wouldn't they insist on maintaining the original plot and character settings? Wei Wei Bai, since I have no other choice, it shouldn't be considered a collapse of character settings, right? The system said, how do you have no other choice? Feed yourself an aphrodisiac? Wei Wei Bai, that's a good idea. The system was speechless. Wei Wei Bai recalled the state of her body. I have a water single spirit root, and the technique I cultivate is the water spirit scripture. However, there's a disadvantage to this technique. When I reach a bottleneck, the energy in my body will be in chaos and my body temperature will drop. Only pure yang or fire energy can help me overcome this difficulty. This was also the reason why the original owner wanted to turn Ningishu into a pill 3 months later. Therefore, as long as she damaged the spiritual energy in her body, she would be in danger. She would be able to hug and kiss Ningishu openly and make him feel like she was using him. Character settings would not collapse. Kissing would still be the same. She didn't believe that his favorability would not increase. Chapter 349. Suddenly, the system reminded her, oh no, the male lead suspects that you saved him, so he's pushing the door open to attack you. Wei Wei Bai was confused, then she looked down and saw that a corner of her dress was missing. She then remembered that Ningishu tore off half of her dress last night. Wei Wei Bai's expression changed. I'll change right away. Ningishu saw her torn dress when he came in, so how could he not understand? She quickly took off the dress and stuffed it under the bed. The system reminded her, you know magic. Use magic to transform into clothes. This smooth white, it's going to scare this little disciple to death. Wei Wei Bai was confused and immediately transformed. I'll transform, change clothes. The system couldn't bear to look. The clothes were transformed, but she wasn't familiar with the process, so she transformed into a sexy thin robe. But the door was suddenly pushed open. Ningishu's cold voice respectfully sounded, Master, this disciple is here to pay his respects. Ningishu was very reluctant to look for Wei Wei Bai, because he knew that every time he came, he would be met with his master's disgusted eyes and a beating. But that jade pendant, that fragrance, and that piece of white cloth. He finally remembered that these were Wei Wei Bai's things. He thought about it, and there was even a faint expectation in his heart. Did his master finally see him in a new light, so she saved him? He bent down as soon as he entered, but his eyes secretly looked up. Wei Wei Bai always wore a white gauze dress. If she didn't change her clothes suddenly, his eyes stared straight, and his whole body froze. Wei Wei Bai was lying sideways on the recliner, her black hair cascading down like a waterfall, draping over her snow-white body. She was only wearing a thin, translucent white gauze, which stuck to her tender and smooth skin, like a layer of mist faintly discernible. Her eyes were half closed, her eyelashes trembling slightly, and her snow-white hands supporting her head, as if she was enduring something. The air was filled with a faint fragrance. For a moment, Ningishu couldn't move his body or his mind. Only the fragrance lingering in his nose, and the portrait of a beauty lying on her side. It was branded into his eyes. Wei Wei Bai suddenly opened her eyes as if she had just realized that someone was there. She coldly spat out a word from her pink lips. Who? Ningishu was shocked and immediately lowered his head. Wei Wei Bai was a nascent soul cultivator, but she didn't notice his arrival. His heart was filled with astonishment, but he didn't reveal it in the slightest. He immediately said respectfully, Master, Ningishu greets you. Just as he finished speaking, a white water sleeve condensed from spiritual energy tore through the air and fiercely attacked him. Ningishu felt a heavy blow to his chest as he was sent flying and slammed into the wall. The excruciating pain caused his vision to turn black. Before he could react, a cold hand had already strangled his neck. Wei Bai easily lifted him up and slammed him into the wall. This was a brutal Captain. What did you see? Wei Bai's face was like ice, her eyes were cold, and her tone was heavy and full of killing intent. Ningishu looked at her, suffocating. The two of them were too close. Her nearly naked body was sticking to him. The thin gauze couldn't cover anything at all. It could only cause one's imagination to run wild. Disciple didn't look up. I didn't see anything. Could Ningishu still say that he saw her body? Wei Bai sneered. You piece of trash. You actually dared to enter my room without notice. Killing you will make my Grand Heavens Mountain lose less face. The original owner was furious and cruel. She was good at finding people to vent her anger on. When Ningishu was found to have a single fire spiritual root, Grand Heavens Mountain thought that they had picked up a treasure. Wei Bai was also happy that she had a disciple with outstanding aptitude. But in the end, he was trash that couldn't cultivate. Chapter 350. This matter made Grand Heavens Mountain suffer ridicule. Wei Bai felt even more humiliated. So, she abused Ningishu even more. Wei Bai wondered why the original owner of her transmigration all liked to seek death. What was even worse was that she had to continue doing it after coming here. Her fingers pinched, and Ningishu's neck began to bleed. Ningishu couldn't breathe, and his chest felt like it was going to explode. His eyes finally showed a trace of pleading. His mouth couldn't make a sound, but it opened and closed to beg for mercy. Wei Bai gave a cold laugh. Go die, you disgraceful piece of trash. After saying this, her fingers tightened and Ningishu felt the arrival of death. As expected, how could the person who saved him be his master? He was a piece of trash that had lost everyone's face, so he deserved to be humiliated and abandoned. Why did he have hope in his heart and break into her room, thinking that he could obtain a trace of warmth and comfort? Ningishu's eyes were filled with death aura. After the death aura, there was a faint golden light that flashed, bringing with it a cold, destructive aura. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to -10. Wei Bai silently cried in her heart. There was no way she could do this work. She felt that she should have dispelled the doubts in Ningishu's heart, but she couldn't really strangle him to death. When Ningishu was on the verge of death, he saw a golden light in front of him. A kind of power that was hidden in his body began to faintly flow. Just as he was about to explode, Wei Bai suddenly let go of her hand. Her face suddenly paled and blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. She suddenly staggered back several steps and finally fell to the ground. Ningishu also sat on the ground, his hands and feet weak. The golden light in his eyes disappeared again. He coughed a few times and looked up to see Wei Bai curled up into a ball. Her black hair was covered in a layer of white frost. His face was even paler than before, so pale that it was emitting cold air. Wei Bai choked and coughed out a few mouthfuls of blood. Sweat actually appeared on her forehead. As soon as the sweat appeared, it turned into ice beads and fell to the ground. Even the air had lost its temperature. The entire room was like an ice cave. Ningishu had never seen anything like this before. Did something go wrong with Wei Bai's cultivation? Master? Ningishu cautiously called out. Wei Bai did not respond. He slowly stood up from the ground, and the submissive expression on his face disappeared. A murderous coldness appeared on his face. He thought of the days when he painstakingly sought immortality, but was abused by Wei Bai. Being bullied and suppressed by the disciples of Grand Heavens Mountain was all because of this woman. The beautiful vision of cultivation in his heart was crushed bit by bit in her hands. The law of the jungle, cruelty and heartlessness, this was what Grand Heavens Mountain had taught him. No one knew that he was looking for Wei Wei Bai. If he killed her, Ning Yishu walked step by step towards Wei Wei Bai. He stared at her, but his tone was incomparably gentle. "Master, what happened to you?" Wei Wei Bai did not answer. Her entire body was trembling. She was so weak that she could not withstand a single blow. Ning Yishu's murderous intent intensified. This was a good opportunity. He had obtained a small dagger by chance. There were ominous bloodstains on it. He tested its spiritual power and found that it was actually a rare magic weapon. As long as the dagger pierced the heart, even if it was a nascent soul cultivator, their soul would immediately scatter. Even their nascent soul would be shattered. Ning Yishu was incomparably nervous. He walked to her side and pretended to support her. Just as his fingers touched her snow-white arm, a chill immediately spread to his fingertips. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 351. After Ning Yishu returned to his rundown house, he found it hard to calm down. When Wei Wei Bai woke up, she would probably kill him. He had to run away immediately. However, Grand Heaven's Mountain had a mountain protecting array. If he didn't have an exit token, he wouldn't be able to leave. He was hated by everyone in Grand Heaven's Mountain, so he couldn't get an exit token. Could it be that he could only wait for death? Just now, he shouldn't have run away. He should have stabbed Wei Wei Bai and let her die. Ning Yishu thought that he would die soon. After all, he understood Wei Wei Bai's temperament. He treated her like that. She would skin him alive and pull out his tendons. However, after trembling in fear for a few days, Wei Wei Bai seemed to have forgotten about him. She didn't call anyone to kill him. Ning Yishu asked around and found out that the Scarlet Moon Mountain's mystic realm was about to open. All the major sects sent people to prepare to enter and seize the mystic realm's immortal treasures. Wei Wei Bai was busy with this and didn't have time to care about him. However, Ning Yishu didn't relax because he knew that the crisis wasn't really over yet. If he was strong enough, Ning Yishu calmed his heart and sat in meditation, drawing qi into his body. However, just like before, his dantian was extremely empty. The spiritual energy in the air couldn't be stored in. Ning Yishu clenched his fist and smashed it on the ground. Not a single crack appeared, but his hand was in great pain from the impact. He suppressed his anger and walked to the table and started flipping through the books. This phenomenon had happened to him before. A single spirit root was blocked and couldn't absorb spiritual energy. There was a treasure called the Blessed Flower that grew in the Scarlet Moon Mountain's mystic realm. It had a miraculous effect on blocked spirit roots. However, only disciples above the foundation establishment stage had the qualifications to enter. As for him, he wasn't even at the first level of qi refinement. He didn't have the qualifications to enter. At first, he planned to use the dagger as a magic weapon to bribe the leader to get a spot. However, now Ning Yishu, Martial Granduncle, is calling for you to go to the Soaring Sky Palace. Suddenly, a foundation establishment disciple bluntly kicked open the door and said. Ning Yishu lowered his head and hid the coldness in his eyes. He said, "Honestly, I'll go now. What would come would come." As expected, Wei Wei Bai would not let him off. He walked out of the wooden house and walked forward with heavy footsteps. He arrived at the most magnificent and grand hall of the Grand Heaven's Mountain. He thought that Wei Wei Bai had called him to Soaring Sky Palace to execute him. That was because this hall was the place where the disciples gathered. But when he arrived here, he discovered that all the disciples of Grand Heaven's Mountain had come. The hall was bustling with people. "I heard that the mystic realm will open early. Martial Granduncle plans to personally lead the team to the Scarlet Moon Mountain today." "That's right. I've heard that this is the last time the mystery realm will be open. That's why even the Grandmaster has returned." Ning Yishu was expressionless as he listened to the conversation of the people around him. He did not reveal his disappointment. This was because he knew that this trip to the mystic realm had nothing to do with him. Suddenly, the bell outside the door rang, and the sound reverberated throughout the hall. The main door of the hall opened with a loud bang. Grandmaster, Martial Granduncle, has arrived. Everyone looked at the main door. Suddenly, a faintly discernible fragrance filled the air. Ning Yishu smelled the familiar fragrance. Wei Wei Bai's beautiful and tender body seemed to flash before his eyes. His jaw tightened, and he hurriedly waved that image away. Then he secretly raised his head and froze again. The morning light poured in from the entrance. The woman who stepped into the hall was wearing a watercolored wide-sleeved fairy dress. Her black hair fell to her shoulders, her skin was as white as snow, and her features were so exquisite that they could steal one's soul. It was not that there were no beautiful disciples around, but when she stepped into the hall, everyone's eyes dimmed. It was as if she was the only one who could shine. Chapter 352. It was clearly the same as before, but why was it so much more exquisite today? Ning Yishu's mind was in a mess. He hurriedly lowered his head, not daring to look again. When Wei Wei Bai walked into the hall, she was in a bad mood. Because the system's notification sounded at the same time. Ding! I am the most beautiful metal activated. The light board is ready. All female animals will automatically turn black. Rose petal perfume will be sprayed. Wei Wei Bai, the background music sounds. The boundless horizon is my love. The flowers are blooming at the foot of the green mountain. Wei Wei Bai's face was drained of color. What the hell was this? She was so embarrassed that she wanted to fly. Grand Heaven Mountain's Grandmaster, Qiu Bai, who was also at the nascent soul stage, was shocked. Junior sister, we haven't seen each other in 2 years. You really have a way to maintain your youthful appearance. You're simply glowing. Wei Wei Bai, hee hee. If you were to stand among the African natives, a sow would surpass a cicada. So this was the function of this medal. For the rest of the matter, Bai Weiwei just had to sit on the side with a cold face and enjoy the cool air. Qiu Bai took charge. After announcing all the disciples who could enter the mystic realm, she prepared to go to Scarlet Moon Mountain. Wei Wei Bai glanced at Ning Yishu indifferently. She suddenly said coldly, "Come here." Ning Yishu's body tensed up. He lowered his head, his eyes dark, but he still walked out respectfully. "Master." Wei Wei Bai glanced at him with disdain and disgust. "Follow me." Ning Yishu was clearly stunned. He couldn't help but look up. But before he could see Wei Wei Bai clearly, a slap had already landed on his face. "Trash, who allowed you to look up?"
Scram.
Ning Yishu only felt pain on his face. That slap actually carried a fragrance. This kind of pain was nothing, but the sneers of others and Wei Wei Bai's disgust made him want to kill. He gritted his teeth and endured. "Yes, master." Wei Wei Bai sighed. The male lead of this novel is a classic example of pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. In the early stages, they were too weak. Even if they were bullied badly, they would endure it. Later on, when he obtained power, those who bullied him would all suffer a calamity. One of the typical Shuangwen protagonists, black-bellied, cold-hearted, and vengeful. The system replied, "That's right. You can bully him as much as you can. He'll just skin you alive and refine your soul." Wei Wei Bai looked as if she had nothing to live for. She complained sadly, "I'll die miserably if I bully others. If I don't bully others, I'll be struck by lightning. Is it easy for me?" The background music played on loop. "You are the most beautiful cloud in my sky. Let me make you stay with all my heart." Wei Wei Bai, can you turn this thing off? Although others couldn't hear it, they couldn't see the petals dancing in the sky. However, Wei Wei Bai still felt that she was too lowly. The system replied, "This is a tool used by the metal to enhance the atmosphere. Once you appear, I guarantee that there will be a burst of fragrance. Every step you take will be like petals flying out. It has its own light effect, and there will be heavenly music playing." Wei Wei Bai, "Turn it off." The system replied, "It can't be turned off. If there are other women around, it will be turned on automatically." Wei Wei Bai, "If I had known, I would have chosen to cook." The disciples of Grand Heaven's Mountain set off towards Crimson Moon Mountain. Ning Yishu followed. No matter what Wei Wei Bai's goal was, as long as he could enter the arcane realm, it was fine. Suddenly, Wei Wei Bai's flying beast carriage flew over his head. A white sleeve of spirit energy flew out from the carriage, wrapped around him, and dragged him into the carriage. Ning Yishu rolled into the fragrant carriage and got up without waiting for her to flip over. Before he could get up, a snow-white, delicate foot had already reached his chin. She exerted some force with her round and pink toes and lifted his slightly astonished face. At https://www.
Sashu.
com/full text at https://www.
Sashu.
com download text at https://www.
Sashu.
com at https://m Sashu. com// to make it easier for you to read next time. You can click saves below to record this reading record. Chapter 353. Ning Yishu thought, how ugly is he? Why is he so annoying? Wei Wei Bai pointed at a small corner of the carriage and said, kneel there, don't be an eyesore. Ning Yishu lowered his head and said respectfully, yes. He knelt there quietly with his head down, looking like he was ready to do anything. Wei Wei Bai said, I think Ning Yishu wants to skin me alive right now. The system said, I think so too. Wei Wei Bai was speechless. Forget it. How could she expect the system to comfort her? Wei Wei Bai looked up at Ning Yishu. She said coldly, raise your head. Ning Yishu hesitated for a while before slowly raising his head. His face was nourished by the elixir, and the bruises were gone. His features were handsome, and his black eyes were clear, as if they did not contain any impurities. His face was expressionless, and he looked a little dull and honest. This kind of dull temperament did not detract from his handsome features. If he did not act like an honest person, and his eyes were lively, the effect would probably be the same as hers. With this kind of appearance, wherever he went, there would be a BGM. Wei Wei Bai forced herself to look away and said in a low voice, praise me. Ning Yishu was speechless. Wei Wei Bai supported her chin with her hand, looking bored. Am I beautiful? This was too shameless. Who would ask someone like this? Ning Yishu was silent for a while before saying, Master is very beautiful. Wei Wei Bai was not satisfied. You don't even look at me. How do you know if I'm beautiful or not? Ning Yishu hesitated for a while before carefully raising his head. What he saw was a barefoot Wei Wei Bai lying on the chair. After she gained some warmth, she looked lively and lively. Her exposed ankles and arms looked like they were carved out of jade. Even if she frowned slightly, her eyes were cold and filled with disgust, but she did not look ferocious. Ning Yishu could not help but say, Master, you're very beautiful. There was a hint of sincerity in his words. Wei Wei Bai was not satisfied. Which part of me is beautiful? Tell me. If you can't, then you're lying. Be careful, or I'll skin you. Ning Yishu's heart turned cold. What was the use of a good-looking skin? She still had a heart like a snake and scorpion. He quickly pretended to be afraid. Master, I'm clumsy. I can't say anything nice. I just think you're beautiful everywhere. Bai Wei Wei laughed. With your personality, what you say sounds like the truth. Seeing that you made me happy, I won't hit you today. The originals, she had a habit. Every she beat Ishu, she, every she. And it was done at a fixed time with a whip. This was her, calm. Wei Wei Bai spent a lot of effort, but she could only come up with such a stupid excuse to not whip him. Striking while the iron was hot, she continued happily, I love to hear honest people praise me. Praise me more, I'll spare you a day of whipping punishment. This, Master, have you become stupid from the cold? Although he thought so, he had no reason to reject something that was obviously good for him. So he racked his brains. Master, you're as beautiful as a fairy. You're a natural beauty, Wei Wei Bai. Are you reciting a 4-word idiom? What about descriptions? parallels, and metaphors. This praise was too perfunctory and lacking in skill. After Ningishu was used to praising her, he felt that it was a bit thin to only use idioms. He could only try his best to observe, and then squeeze out some praise while observing. Master, your skin is as white as snow, much prettier than the village belle I saw when I was young. By Weiwei, this is so awkward that I can't show my face. She really wanted to take a whip and whip him to death. Chapter 354. And your figure is light and graceful, and your voice is like a silver bell. In front of you, other women are like village women. As Ningishu spoke, he suddenly felt that this was not a lie. When he was in the hall, the female disciple, who usually looked incomparably beautiful, when Weiwei Bai came in, no matter how beautiful she was usually, she would dim in an instant. She was even worse than a village woman. Your black hair is thick and fluffy. If it could be wrapped around his fingertips, would definitely be so beautiful that it would make people tremble. Your face is crimson like the sunset. Her lips were red without any lipstick, and her eyes were charming but not seductive. Ningishu had never observed Weiwei Bai so carefully. In the past, her image in his heart was that of a vicious woman. Her face was twisted and ugly in his heart. But today, her face was truly in his eyes, because he took the initiative to observe. He could even feel her beautiful attack power. Ningishu's heart trembled as he hurriedly lowered his head. Suddenly, he couldn't say any words of praise. He could speak fluently when it came to lies. He didn't know why, but once he realized that he was telling the truth, he couldn't say a single word. Weiwei Bai casually looked at her fingers. Say it. You said it quite well. Why didn't you say it? Ningishu's lips moved, but when he lowered his head, he saw that her feet were gently swaying. That exquisite ankle, the beautiful outline of the instep, with light pink toenails, every part was just right. The corner of his mouth moved, and the image of him just now flashed through his mind. This image made his body stiffen. He immediately looked away, his fingernails digging deep into his palms to maintain a clear mind. Then he heard his own wooden voice. Master is beautiful everywhere. I can't think of any words of praise that are worthy of you. System. This is an awkward boast. Can you be a little bit more shameless? The scene was silent for a moment. Ningishu's mind was also somewhat tense. Suddenly, a chuckle broke the indescribable silence. Weiwei Bai smiled unusually happily. Since you're honest, I won't beat you for the next few days. I'll beat you again after we return from the mystic realm and return to Grand Heaven Mountain. Ningishu lowered his head, his tone sincere and joyful. Thank you, Master. Ding. The male lead's favorability is at -10. Weiwei Bai was smiling on the surface, but she was cursing in her heart. The system said, I feel like our entire family is going to be struck to death by the ninth heaven profound thunder in this plane. Weiwei Bai said calmly, No, you have to trust me. Even if you don't believe me, you have to believe my face. The system retorted, What can your face do? Are you so thick-skinned that you can block the lightning punishment? Weiwei Bai. What I meant was that my face is beautiful. The system, speechless. It's not appropriate to say anything. Weiwei Bai's expression darkened. Why do you think I asked him to say that I'm beautiful? Ningishu lowers his head when he sees me, and I only have a vague image in his heart. I'm so vicious and cruel. I'm probably a hag in his heart. So I forced him to say that I'm beautiful, so he has to look at my beautiful face. If he says that I'm beautiful too often, he'll automatically be brainwashed. The system. This is the first time I've seen such a shameless brainwashing method. Weiwei Bai touched her face fondly. Once a man thinks that a woman is beautiful, then that's when the favorability will soar. The system couldn't hold it in anymore. What if his mind is firm and not moved by beauty? Weiwei Bai was stunned, thinking about this possibility. Suddenly, she reached out and lifted Ningishu's face, kissing him softly without thinking. // to make it easier for you to read it next time, you can click the below to record this reading. Chapter 355. The Scarlet Moon Mountain's realm had been opened. Wei Wei Bai stood in front of the realm with a group of Grand Heaven's Mountain disciples following behind her. There were people from various sects around her. Ning Yishu had also rushed over, his expression calm. However, when Wei Wei Bai glanced at him, he could not help but feel nervous. Wei Wei Bai said, "It's a little awkward to see him." The system said, "Weren't you awkward when he skinned you?" Wei Wei Bai was speechless. The opening of the realm was considered a small climax in the novel. The realm was actually a huge trap formed by the obsessions and desires of all things in the world. After it was opened a few hundred years ago, it had been opened 5 times. The last time the realm was opened this year was also a smokescreen. The first 5 times were to let people know that the realm was harmless and had many treasures, attracting people. This year, with the last gimmick, it finally attracted most of the outstanding disciples of the sections. 8 or 9 out of 10 people who went to the realm were swallowed by the realm as nutrients. And in the novel's plot, Ning Yishu also went. However, because of the activation of his pure yang energy, he escaped death in the realm. Like all the main characters in the novel, he also took away many treasures from the people who were swallowed by the realm. The most important thing was, it was the first time he knew that there was a power in his body that was different from other people's. Although he still could not cultivate, he could not use it freely. However, with the awakened consciousness of this power, he was able to break open the alchemy furnace and escape 3 months later. This time, Wei Wei Bai did not go to the realm. Before she went, she asked the system, "Can I go, or can the plot not be changed at all?" The system said, "If the ending is the same, the process is up to you." Just like the result of the realm, the male lead must awaken his pure yang energy and obtain many treasures. As for the process, the details of the novel were not perfect, so it was just casual. Qiu Bai Feng Xin stood next to Bai Weiwei. "Junior sister, I'll have to trouble you to lead the disciples in with me this time." Weiwei Bai did not look happy.
Yes.
Her personality was always unpredictable, so Qiu Bai didn't suspect anything. Suddenly, Bai Weiwei heard that familiar reminder come out again. "I'm the prettiest metal activated. Lighting engineer, turn on the light board. There are many beauties present. Automatic upgrade function. Beginning made to Xiao. A fragrant wind blew past. All of a sudden, it was as if 100 flowers had bloomed. Everything at the scene dimmed, except for Weiwei Bai, who was floating like a fairy, so beautiful that it made people unable to breathe. When they saw her, everyone felt as if their eyes were about to become pregnant. Celestial music seemed to be faintly drifting past his ears, and his nose was filled with the fragrance of flowers. How could there be such an otherworldly woman in this world? Weiwei Bai's heart did not waver. She even felt like killing someone. The background music roared in her ears. The curved river came from the sky, flowing into the sea of colors, the fiery ballad. She really wanted to square dance.
Fall.
Change the song. Why was her BGM the most dazzling ethnic style? The system said, "Oh, okay. Then, Swona's sound, sister, you sit at the front of the boat. Brother walks on the shore." Weiwei Bai felt like dying. Why did she want to be the most beautiful woman in this world? Qiu Bai suddenly held her hand. "Junior sister, seeing you today, I finally know what it means to be as beautiful as a fairy." Weiwei Bai, haha, as beautiful as a village flower. The two of them stood at the top looking like a perfect match. Weiwei Bai suddenly felt something. She looked back and saw Ning Yishu standing in the crowd, looking at her with a dark gaze. When he realized that she had noticed, he lowered his head. But his fingers slowly clenched. To record this chapter. Crossover system. Adonis, come over here's comma. Chapter 356. Weiwei Bai pulled her hand back and smiled coldly. "Senior brother, let's go." Qiu Bai smiled, but there was a hint of treachery in her eyes. "Okay, junior sister." The sky suddenly darkened. A huge black cloud condensed. The elders in charge of opening the secret realm used all kinds of Dharma treasures to form a huge formation to open the secret realm. Golden characters appeared in the sky, connecting to form a complicated golden 8-trigram formation. The elders shouted in unison, "Open!" The giant stone door of the secret realm slowly opened in the thick black clouds. Dense spirit chi rushed out of the secret realm. Who knew how many natural treasures were needed to have so much spirit chi? The moment the secret realm opened, all the sects took out their Dharma treasures and started a treasure hunt. At that moment, treasured fans, flying beasts, long swords, and flower baskets carried the disciples of the various sects and charged into the secret realm. Wei Bai waved her hand, and a white sleeve of spirit chi appeared. Qiu Bai also summoned dozens of flying swords and sent all the Grand Heavens Mountain disciples up. Ning Yishu could only be considered a normal youth and couldn't go up by himself. Qiu Bai also forgot about him and led the disciples through the stone door. He stood in the same spot. The empty surroundings made his heart turn cold. All of a sudden, a white water sleeve pierced through the air and wrapped around his waist, pulling him up. Ning Yishu looked up and saw Bai Weiwei's sleeves fluttering in the wind. Her slender hands were tied in water sleeves. She dragged him straight into the clouds and through the stone door. The stone door closed. An ominous black aura appeared in the crack of the door and started to corrode the golden formation. The secret realm was different from the outside world. The sky was an ominous purple, and the 6 moons were glowing in the sky. Under the moon there were mountains, rivers, forests, and flower fields. Everywhere was beautiful and dangerous. In this place, there was a strange flower every 3 steps and a spirit spring every 5 steps. Everyone split up to harvest the mature spirit herbs. This time, Qiu Bai led the team. Therefore, Wei Bai didn't need to do anything. All she needed to do was accompany Ning Yishu and stroll around. Ning Yishu silently calculated the map of the secret realm that he had seen. He knew that the blessed flower he wanted was not far away. He didn't dare to let Wei Bai see through him, so he could only silently follow behind her. Suddenly, Wei Bai turned around and said lazily, "I'm tired. You squat down." Ning Yishu stopped in his tracks and hesitated for a moment before slowly crouching down. Then, he felt Wei Bai's body temperature pressing against him. She leaned on his back and whispered into his ear, "Carry me." It was clearly humiliating. Ning Yishu only felt an itch in his ear. Her warm breath brushed past his sensitive ear, causing the tip of his ear to turn red. He didn't feel the slightest bit of shame in his heart. Instead, he felt a little clumsy. He was afraid that he would drop her. After she absorbed the energy in his body warmed up. He didn't know how long his energy could keep her warm. When Ning Yishu thought of this, his eyes darkened. He wasn't thinking about whether there would be a problem with his body. Instead, he was thinking about when she would need his energy. Ning Yishu coldly sneered at himself in his heart. This kind of poisonous woman should be killed when the opportunity arises. When he carried her to the side of a spirit spring, the dagger in his pocket suddenly heated up. This blood-stained dagger had a warning function. There was something terrifying in the spirit spring, and it was very secretive. Wei Bai didn't seem to have discovered it. The blood-stained dagger would only give a warning to extremely terrifying and cruel dangers. He made many calculations in his heart and finally said softly, "Master, are you tired? Do you want to rest?" Chapter 357. Wei Bai, trash, you're the one who's tired. You can't even walk such a short distance. Ning Yishu endured. Wei Bai, forget it, put me down. Ning Yishu didn't think that she would actually agree. He hesitated for a moment before finally making up his mind and putting her on a rock beside the spirit spring. Wei Bai didn't notice anything in the spirit spring. Then he secretly walked a bit further away and even put his hand on his pocket. If she was hurt by something in the spirit spring, he could finish her off. But her movements made him freeze. Wei Bai lifted her foot and her skirt fell to her calf, revealing her snow-white skin. Her tone was cold, as if she was calling for a servant. "Come here and take off my shoes." Ningishu only felt a bloodthirsty impulse churning in his chest. But under the bloodthirsty impulse, another strange desire faintly emerged. He swallowed his anger, lowered his head, and carefully took off her shoes. When the shoes were taken off, the bells rang. There was a silver anklet on her ankle, and there were 2 small emerald green bells on the chain. Every time she shook it, her snow-white skin and emerald green bells gave off a faintly discernible sense of temptation. Ningishu's fingers touched her ankle and then left. His fingers actually burned for a moment. Ding. The male lead's affection has increased to 1. Wei Bai. It's been a long time since I've seen such a stingy affection. She shook her foot and said to him, "Help me wash my feet." For a moment, Ningishu really wanted to break her foot. But he still endured. He had endured so much humiliation and torture. His heart was like still water before, and those tortures couldn't affect his mood. But these days, his mood was clearly out of control. He maintained a wooden expression as he lowered his head and held her feet in his hands. Then, he dipped her feet into the water. The water was sparkling, and her pink toes were curled up, making her look exceptionally cute. Ningishu was speechless. How could he find her cute? Hateful was more like it. "Did you not eat? Are you going to wash until next year?" Bai Weiwei impatiently kicked the water with her foot, splashing it on his face. When the water droplets fell from his beautiful eyebrows, his eyes turned terrifyingly dark for a moment. Then, he quickly lowered his eyes. "This disciple's technique is unfamiliar, and I'm afraid I'll offend Master." With that said, his hand covered her instep. His Adam's apple bobbed as his fingers gently slid across the skin of her instep. He suddenly realized that it was somewhat difficult for him to maintain his previous indifference. Wei Bai complained to the system as she mischievously played around. TSK, an 18-year-old boy in his budding years. Even a female pig would want to have sex with him, not to mention someone as beautiful as me. The system said, "Prepare the background music, the boundless horizon is my love." Wei Bai said, "Shut up." Suddenly, the water was filled with a fishy smell. The water turned red, and it was frightening. The red water column turned into a sharp blade and suddenly attacked Wei Bai. Wei Bai's expression changed, and she retracted her foot from the water, and the bell on her ankle rang. The bell rang clearly, and a green light blocked the attack of the red blood spring. She flung out her water sleeve and wrapped it around Ningishu's body, and the 2 of them left the water at the same time. The water boiled, and a huge eye appeared. The white of the eye was red, and the pupil was nowhere to be seen. It was disgusting and scary. It opened its mouth full of fangs, and an ominous red mist filled the air. The. Chapter 358. The red mist was highly poisonous. Even Ningishu, who had guessed that there was a monster in the spring, changed his expression. He did not expect the poison to be an indiscriminate attack. Looking at the speed at which the poison was spreading, there was no way he could escape. Just as the red mist was about to hit him, a cool water vapor instantly wrapped around him. "Trash, stay aside." Wei Bai looked at him sarcastically, then turned around and waved her hand. Her water sleeves danced in the air and clean water droplets danced in the air. Her footsteps were light and calm, and every step she took had the rhythm of a dancer. The red poisonous mist could not even get close to her body. The clean water droplets condensed into water streams and turned into water-colored satin sleeves, breaking the invasion of the mist. Ningishu had never seen Wei Bai fight before. The enemies that the blood-stained dagger warned of were usually very strong. But this monster did not even have the strength to fight back in front of Wei Bai. Moreover, the way she fought was different from any battle he had ever seen. It was so beautiful that it was like dancing. Wei Bai was dancing. Although her body was not good in real life, it was not that bad when she was young. So she practiced classical dance, and, with her spiritual energy, she felt very good when she danced. "I feel like I'm going to fly." Wei Wei Bai looked at her water sleeves with satisfaction, beating the monster until it cried out. The system said, "The background music is playing. I want to fly higher, fly higher." The beauty that she painstakingly created was shattered with one hit. Wei Wei Bai had nothing to live for. Even acting cool had to be destroyed by the background music. She did not have the heart to continue acting, and with a few water sleeves, the monster in the spring was completely destroyed. The spring was calm again, and only the monster's remains were left floating on the water. She pulled back her water sleeves smoothly, her skirt fluttering without wind, and her hair was as black as ink. Amidst the water vapor that filled the air, she raised her eyebrows from the side of her face, and the corners of her mouth curled up into a smile. There was actually a hint of playfulness that was rarely seen. A mere monster condensed from resentment dares to be so presumptuous in front of me. He was clearly still in that mocking posture. So hateful and heartless. For the first time, Ning Yishu felt that this was how she should be. Her mind was moved again. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 5. Wei Wei Bai turned around, took back the water satin on his body, and then looked at him coldly. "You are simply a disgrace to my Grand Heaven's Mountain. Once my body recovers, you can scram off Grand Heaven's Mountain. A piece of trash like you is not fit to be my disciple." Ning Yishu felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. He froze for a moment. Only then did he reply calmly, "Yes, master." He tried to make this reply emotionless, but he was so tense that it was unnatural. Wei Wei Bai could not be bothered to look at him. "Let's go." Ning Yishu was silent for a while before he followed her. However, before they could take 2 steps, Wei Wei Bai suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Her body swayed, and she fell directly onto Ning Yishu, who was following behind her. The spiritual energy in her body was in chaos. Her damaged meridians were ravaged by the spiritual energy, making them even more serious. Ning Yishu hugged her. "Master, what happened to you?" Wei Wei Bai coughed out 2 mouthfuls of blood. "Damn it, my body had to have problems at this time." She coldly ordered, "Kiss me." His power could help her recover her body. A trace of viciousness flashed through Ning Yishu's eyes. At this time, he took out a dagger and ruthlessly stabbed it into her body. He would be able to kill her. Wei Wei Bai frowned. "What are you dawdling for?" Ning Yishu hesitated for a while, but in the end, he gave up on this risky plan. Then he lowered his head and gently kissed her lips. The coolness and fragrance on her lips intertwined with his burning breath. Without waiting for her to absorb the power in his body, a cold laugh rang out. "I didn't expect that junior apprentice sister, who looks as pure as ice and clean as jade, would actually be a lewd whore, getting together with your own disciple." Just as these words fell, a sword light directly attacked Wei Wei Bai. Chapter 359. You can search Time Transmigration System. Adonis, come to Sashu. Come on Baidu to find the... Ning Yishu was hugging Wei Wei Bai. This sharp sword light was planning to pierce through him as well. He couldn't dodge and thought that he was definitely going to die. Suddenly, Bai Weiwei's palm hit him hard, and he was pushed away. Ning Yishu rolled a few times and hit a rock. He looked forward dizzily. What he saw shocked him and made his hands and feet turn cold. That sword light stabbed into her body and blood immediately flowed out, dyeing her dress red. If she hadn't pushed him away, he would have died. All sorts of thoughts flashed through Ning Yishu's mind. He thought that she would directly drag him to be that sword light. Wei Wei Bai was covered in blood. She looked at Ning Yishu with a pale face. "Come here," she said weakly. This was a very good chance to escape. The person who slowly walked out of the forest was clearly targeting Wei Wei Bai, and not him. But as if at the behest of demons and gods, Ning Yishu's hands and feet were extremely fast, and he flew in front of Bai Weiwei. He hugged her, his hands covered in blood. "Master." When he called out, his lips were trembling. He covered her wound with his hand, but the blood couldn't be stopped. Wei Wei Bai panted weakly and ignored Ning Yishu. The man who walked out of the forest was actually Qiu Bai. He still looked kind and kind. Junior sister, how could you be so careless? I felt that there was something wrong with your spirit energy these few days. I didn't expect that you were in a state of bedevilment. If you had told me earlier, I wouldn't have watched you suffer. Wei Wei Bai looked at him angrily. Qiu Bai, what do you mean? Qiu Bai's smile was still the same. Junior sister, you have grown older, but your brain hasn't.
You are still so stupid.
Wei Wei Bai, I can tolerate being stabbed, but I can't tolerate being older. Slagstem, do you have a cheat?
Kill that bastard for me.
I bought you a painkiller. You only have a little bit of HP left, so we have to save it. Don't learn from those wastrels. Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai held back her anger as shock filled her eyes. Senior brother, have you been possessed? How dare you attack me? Qiu Bai laughed sinisterly. Stop pretending, junior sister. Do you think I don't know how vicious and merciless you are? Haven't you long been on guard against me? Wei Wei Bai finally had the time to flip through the novel. There were hundreds of millions of words in the long leveling up novel. She was tired of just reading the main points. She didn't have much of an impression of a small character like Qiu Bai. After reading Qiu Bai's plot, it seemed that after Ning Yishu was kicked off the cliff, Grand Heaven's Mountain started to become chaotic. Qiu Bai and Bai Weiwei already found each other unpleasing to the eye. Along with the fact that they didn't have enough resources to split between them, the power of a mountain could only allow one person to break through to nascent soul. Thus, Qiu Bai revealed his sinister side, and Weiwei Bai wasn't a good person either. The two of them started to fight. In the end, Weiwei Bai won. Then, Ning Yishu returned to slap her face, and she was killed. All the treasures and resources were taken by the male lead. What was the point of fighting? It was better to sit down and have a heart-to-heart talk. After all, the male lead would be the one in the end.
Hee.
With the plot, Weiwei Bai laughed coldly. Qiu Bai, we are from the same sect. You actually attacked me so cruelly. Qiu Bai's sword danced in the air as he acted like a human. Junior sister, I once asked for your hand in marriage and wanted to dual cultivate with you. You didn't know what was good for you and rejected me. Weiwei Bai was infuriated. You know that I cultivate the water spirit scripture and need to protect my primordial Yin. Where did you get the face to ask me to dual cultivate with you? You're the only one who benefits. What awaits me is my cultivation being destroyed. Qiu Bai, you have such a vicious heart. At the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 360. Qiu Bai. How can he compare to you? You kill people for cultivation resources and you take in a disciple but beat and scold him every day. Bai Weiwei. This is a pot that doesn't boil. Qiu Bai suddenly smiled amiably. Ning Yishu, right? In terms of seniority, you should call me Martial Uncle. Listen to my advice. This woman is extremely evil. Her spirit energy is in chaos, and she has been absorbing your spirit energy to heal herself. If you don't kill her, what awaits you is the destruction of your spirit root. Ning Yishu couldn't help but tighten his grip on Weiwei Bai. So she had been absorbing his spirit energy all this time. If a person's spirit energy was depleted to a certain extent, their spirit root would indeed be destroyed. Weiwei Bai said fiercely, "Shut up, bitch." With that, a white water sleeve appeared in the air and wrapped around Qiu Bai's sword. Qiu Bai's expression turned cold. You're so heavily injured, and you still think you can defeat me. With that, the sword flashed, and the water sleeve shattered. Weiwei Bai felt a tightness in her chest, and she spat out a mouthful of blood. Without even thinking, she raised her head and kissed Ning Yishu. The energy in his body entered her body. Ning Yishu's heart turned even colder. She was really treating him like trash and using him. Although he didn't know how much spirit energy he had left, Weiwei Bai was absorbing it like this. His spirit root would be destroyed sooner or later. Qiu Bai laughed arrogantly. Ning Yishu, I'll teach you a method. As long as you concentrate your energy in your dantian and block the path of the spirit energy, no one will be able to absorb your spirit energy. Wei Wei Bai's face was pale, and her lips trembled. She had absorbed some energy. However, it was still very painful. She laughed coldly. How could my disciple listen to you? With that, Wei Wei Bai seemed to want to confirm something and looked coldly at Ningishu. Kiss me. It was still a simple word. It carried the disdain of a command. But Ningishu could feel the tension in her body and the bone-chilling coldness of her skin. He lowered his eyes and her blood kept flowing out from his fingers. Even the blood was cold. Ningishu's rationality told him that this was the best chance to get rid of Wei Wei Bai. Kiss me. Bai Wei Wei repeated again. Her tone was cold, but there was a trace of trembling. He didn't know if it was because of the cold, but her face revealed a kind of pure white, fragile indifference. This woman is so vicious. Ningishu suddenly lowered his head and pressed his lips against hers. That familiar power surged up again and entered Bai Wei Wei's body. Her body immediately relaxed the spirit energies to calm. Calm, the scene of a woman wearing a flying immortal dress lying in the man's arms, and the two of them kissing was actually especially beautiful. Qiu Bai and the system. I feel like I've been stuffed with a mouthful of dog food. Qiu Bai's smile suddenly became twisted. Junior sister, you're really not picky. You're actually doing it with your disciple in broad daylight. Wei Wei Bai absorbed some of the energy, and the spirit energy started to heal her wounds. The blood finally stopped. She glanced over and said in disdain, being with my disciple is better than being with trash like you. With that, she reached out and hugged Ningishu's waist. She leaned her head on his chest, and her voice suddenly became gentle. Even if he's trash, he's still better than you. When she said this, her soft body leaned against him without any defense. Ningishu lowered his head and saw her smile. It was a smile of disdain, but he was in high spirits. Qiu Bai's face immediately darkened. You don't know shame. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.